live. Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer. We are brought to you by OddsShopper. And in case I missed the date, it is Tuesday, June 14th. Welcome to the Stochastic Deeper Dive, depending on where you look at the very least. Awesemo.com rebrand in full effect. We are now Stochastic. You will hear it a lot in the future. So get used to it. Adam, how are you?
Doing pretty well. Back at my place, have internet, which is great. I've had that for about an hour now. So yeah, first show I'm doing from the new apartment.
It's a big day of new things around these parts, including a new name, which is pretty exciting. We have 15 games to talk about for today, an absolutely massive slate. Do you like it when it's like a 14 or 15 gamer? Do you
Not
care
particularly.
at all?
I prefer it like 8 to 10.
Yeah, it does become a bit too ridiculous on days like today, but we don't really have much of a choice, do we?
I'll touch this off the top just because I happen to see it from Steve Sant. Where have Adam's GPP plays video is gone? Did he stop doing them? No, I just haven't had internet. I did them when I was in LA, and then I got home on Monday. Didn't have internet, couldn't get it fixed until today, and it didn't get fixed today until like an hour ago. So just hasn't happened.
That'll do it. For everybody that hasn't done it yet, and it looks like it's most of the people that are in here, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. But let's run those likes up. They are not nearly high enough. I usually am, though. We got 15 games. I think we just need to dive in. I am ready to do it if you are.
I'm getting there, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm also not ready either because I need to grab updated ownership. So I was hoping you would have been like, no, I'm still doing this. But
yeah, I mean, it's easier for me to just be like, oh yeah, I'm not ready, but I can say yes, and I'll be ready by the time you ask me something. It's more difficult for you.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I did not update the ownership, but it doesn't really matter for right now. Phillies and Marlins, 4.6 run implied total for the Phils, 4 for the Marlins. Zach Eflin, Trevor Rogers on the hill. Both these guys pulling a little bit of ownership. Eflin, a little bit more than Rogers. Let's just start there. How do you feel about that ownership on Eflin? I think it's about right. Similar story for Rogers.
Yeah, I mean, Rogers has been weird this year. Like, he last year showed a lot of strikeout upside, and this year it really just hasn't been there. So there's a part of me that's interested in getting to him, because he is 6,300 at that price tag, just being a stretched out starting pitcher. There's going to be some value. It is certainly a dangerous matchup against Philadelphia, though. I do think that there is still some built-in strikeout upside just because, chances are he's probably not the 30% strikeout guy that he was last year at this point. He's only at 19.6% for the season, but I'm still sort of willing to take chances there just at the cheap price tag. The issue is that, he is getting some ownership as well, projected for 2% ownership, 15% chance of being a top 2 value. So that makes me more interested. Certainly a dangerous matchup, negative park shift going into Philadelphia. It's humid on the East Coast today, as it will be probably every day for the next 2 months. But at that price and low ownership, I don't mind getting to some, but still certainly not going to be a priority when there's 30 pitchers.
Do you anticipate getting to more Rogers or Eflin?
Probably Eflin. Eflin certainly getting more ownership at 14%, but he's not exactly expensive either at 7,700. Miami hasn't been a bad offense this year, but I still think, it's a better offense to target than Philadelphia is. Eflin with a 3.89 xFIP this year, still only a 20.6% strikeout percentage, though.
Anything else you want to touch on for the pitching here?
I don't think so. It's kind of just two guys that I don't feel great about, but that also I think are pretty fairly priced.
Do you have a preference in the bats? They are directly next to each other in our stack score. Marlins are 16th, Phillies are 17th. Neither team pulling any real ownership. I tend to look at this and think, like, my raw data slightly prefers the Phillies, but you also have Zach Eflin in 15% of lineups, which probably gives the Marlins a bit of a bump. All told, they're probably pretty equal. I don't really have much of a take here.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with them being equal as well. Even if you look at, the top value percentage, neither one is that cheap. Neither one is super likely to be the top stack. They're both between 2 and 3%. And I agree with you. Like, Philadelphia is certainly the offense that you would prefer to target. They just have a lot of power in their lineup, tons of upside there. But Miami's also facing a more popular pitcher. So, I think they are both pretty similar to me.
Okay. Favorite Phillies bat, if you have one?
Let me find their lineup. There are so many teams playing today, and I'm on the wrong day, so that's why I can't find it.
Doing a great job over there.
You can go first.
Okay. First two bats that I look at would be Schwarber and Harper, but we're talking lefty on both of them. I don't mind that. They're not pulling any ownership. So probably Real Muto at no ownership feels like a pretty decent spot. I just don't know what you're like. If you want to one-off a catcher, there are worse ways to do it.
Yeah, I was going to say Real Muto is always towards the top of the list for me just because there are so few good hitting catchers. I'll put Castellanos out there, though. $4,100 price tag, only pulling 3% ownership for a guy with the kind of power he does here, that he does have in a pretty decent spot here against Rogers.
Oh, shit. I never added. I assume he's Nicholas in our ownership. Yeah, sure is. I was like, he's not showing up as owned at all here, but that explains it. Let's go ahead and update that for myself.
Yes, I mean, for what it's worth, this year against right-handed hitters, Rogers only a 16.5% strikeout percentage, 231 expected ISO allowed. Castellanos, since the start of last season against left-handed pitching, 239 expected ISO, 376 expected WOBA. Pretty much in line with what you would expect from him.
Favorite bat on the Marlins, and why is it Jesus Aguilar?
It's pretty much always Jazz Chisholm.
Not that I disagree with you, but Aguilar, 2,200 for a first baseman. Like I said, there are worse places to go, but Jazz Chisholm, obviously the best bat in the Marlins lineup. Anything else here?
Just, I guess, to mention it, once again, Eflin, pretty drastic splits. 18.6% strikeout percentage to lefties, 23% to righties, 176 expected ISO allowed to lefties, 104 to righties. So, again, it probably came across as me like disputing your Aguilar point, but 2,200 certainly gives you plenty of upside there. I just kind of wanted to reiterate that Eflin, we've seen for years, does a better job of really limiting power to righties.
Okay, let's keep it moving. Yankees and Rays. Yankees, 4.7 run implied total, Rays 3.2. We get the Garrett Cole experience. Once again, that experience was not a fun experience the last time out. He's 10-5 today.
I disagree.
You didn't have him?
I didn't have much, and I was overweight on the Twins, but I still lost money, so it didn't matter.
Well, I had him, and I'm going to have him again today, but that's neither here nor there. 34% owned. To me, he's the best pitching option on the slate. To the public ownership, that belongs to Dylan Cease. I'm going to get your thoughts in a second. Corey Kluber pulling no ownership, and I don't believe that he should here. Any thoughts quickly on Kluber?
Not really. He's kind of just been a middle of the road guy, 22% strikeout percentage, 3.76 xFIP. He's somebody that I've been overweight on in some spots recently. I would be pretty surprised if this is one of them, though. Just, certainly not a spot that I'm looking to target, especially when you do have 15 games. It's different if you have a 5, 6, 7 game slate. You kind of just have to suck it up and play some guys you don't really want to, but certainly have more options at lower absolute ownership on a slate like this.
Feel free to take your shot on Cole. Is today a day that you're getting to him?
Yeah, I mean, I assumed last time was going to be too. It's just like I'm never going to be upset about getting to Cole. I'm never looking at Cole and saying, oh, I don't think he's a good play. You look at the pitching options on tonight's slate, and I understand why Cease is getting more ownership. I mean, the matchup is fantastic, and he's nearly $2,000 less expensive. But Cole is pretty much at a price point by himself. The last slate you had, I think it was like him, Fried, somebody else. There were 3 or 4 guys at the top. And so I ended up getting like a lot of Fried, not as much Cole, and being around the field on whoever the third guy was. But here, with there being less guys to choose from, you still have Fried against Washington, but you don't have those other pay up arms. I think, the 33% ownership on Cole makes sense.
You'd be surprised to note that before we even got into Garrett Cole, just after we said his name, there was a certain chat member that let us know that they're fading Garrett Cole today.
Sean V.
There you go. Can't beat it. All right, so that's all I've got on Cole. Do you have interest in going to the Rays bats on the opposite side of the Cole ownership in a similar way to the Twins in the last start?
Not particularly. Bigger slate and just really difficult, I think, to get to Tampa Bay. We have them with the second lowest top stack percentage, only ahead of Detroit. Not getting any ownership either, but the thing on a slate this big is just that, you're going to get a lot of teams that have very little aggregate ownership. You don't have to go to the one that's facing Garrett Cole.
Not to mention, just not having Cole is probably all the leverage you need on a 15 gamer. like you also have to then have the Rays be exceptional. Cole can just be pedestrian. It doesn't necessarily mean the Rays are all that good. You still have the
Right,
other
yeah,
29
that's
teams,
kind of
like,
the issue. Like on smaller slates, it like my lineups naturally tend to prioritize getting to high, stacking against higher owned pitchers more, just because there's less middle ground. On a slate like this, it's very easy for the Rays to ruin Garrett Cole's start and then still not be remotely close to a tournament winning team.
Absolutely. What about the Yankees on the opposite side? 21st in aggregate ownership. They are 17th in top stack, 29th in our stack score. I like the Yankees quite a bit more than that, but I still don't necessarily see them as a priority team. Do you see it differently?
No, that's how I see it as well. Just so many teams to choose from. You're going to get a lot of bad pitchers that you can stack against, and they're not all going to have a lot of ownership. But at the same time, I'm never going to be upset if I get to the Yankees at relatively low ownership. The matchup against Kluber is pretty middle of the road. I think I mentioned it earlier, but a 22.5% strikeout percentage, 3.7 xFIP, certainly not a gas can. Has been a little bit home run prone with about 1.1 home runs per 9, and you certainly have tons of power in the Yankees lineup, but they are not cheap. I mean, Aaron Judge is 6,200, Rizzo's 55, Stanton's 52. So not the easiest team to get to. Not a team that I expect to be getting a lot of.
All righty. That's a weird one. Like you just sort of assume they're going to be higher in a top stack odds than they currently are. It's kind of weird to me. I don't have anything else for Yankees Rays. Do you have an individual bat that you would like to point out?
No, not really. I mean, if people didn't know Aaron Judge is ridiculously good, then now you do.
That's a good point. Let's go to game number 3, Nats and Braves. The 3.6 run implied total on the Nats, 5.4 for the Braves. Josiah Gray going for the Nats, I believe. Has that been confirmed?
It's
not him anymore.
They pushed him yesterday, so probably him today.
Yeah. It's Jackson Tetrault. Right. Forgot to make that update earlier today when I didn't confirm it. I don't think that's going to matter all that much for what we're doing here. Max Fried going for the Braves, and he is 8% owned. This is sort of the piece that I want to get from you. What do you think about Max Fried today and the relationship between Fried's ownership and Cole's ownership?
I like the discount there. I mean, so we have Cole being over-owned, 33, 34% to 21%, but still clearly the second highest top 2 percentage. Fried, 9.5% top 2 percentage, 8% ownership. I'm certainly interested in making that pivot, especially in lineups where maybe I do have some more popular hitters. Fried doesn't give you the same sort of strikeout upside that Cole does. For the season, Cole's at 30.7%. Fried is at 23%, but he's still a really good pitcher. 2.93 xFIP, doesn't give up home runs, doesn't walk guys. So Fried is someone where, if Cole goes out there and does his thing, Max Fried's probably not going to beat him. Like Fried's not neck and neck with Cole in terms of DFS talent. But if Cole goes out there and gives you that game where he, gives up 4 earned runs and strikes out 10 guys and still goes for like 20, 21 DraftKings points, Fried is someone that certainly can beat that at much lower ownership. So I think that, in a vacuum, I guess, like Cole is still where I'd rather get just because of the gap in strikeout upside. And typically in DFS, that's what I care about the most is just, if I have to pay $400 more and I get a 7% bump in strikeout percentage, then normally that's where I'm going to go. But sure. I also, it's a situation where if you offered me 4-1 and I get to take Max Fried, I would do that pretty much every day. So it really just kind of depends on, what the lineups look like. I would expect that across 150 lineups for me, my total exposure to Fried versus Cole has a lot to do with what my highest owned offenses end up being. If they end up being more popular offenses, I would think I probably get a bunch of Max Fried. If they end up being low owned offenses, I would think I'm getting more Max Cole relatively, or Garrett Cole relatively.
Just to confirm, it is Jackson Tetrault. I don't know if he's in the player pool yet, so I'm taking a look right now. Do you see a salary for this character?
No, I don't.
Okay. That'll probably do it for him then. I don't think.
I just pulled up this would be his major league debut. At AAA this year, he's made 12 starts, 58 innings pitched, 20.9% strikeout percentage, nearly a 10% walk rate, 5.25 FIP. Doesn't really seem like somebody that is likely to just come up to the major leagues and have success.
No, particularly against the reigning, defending, undisputed champions of baseball, the Atlanta Braves. 5th in ownership, 3rd in our stack tool, 3rd in top stacks. They are my number 1 stack today. Talk to me about the Atlanta Braves.
Tons of power, tons of strikeouts in this lineup too, but a lot of power. They are without Ozzy Albies, which is unfortunate. That's going to be for the foreseeable future. Fractured, I believe, his foot last night. But you still have Acuna. You have Swanson in the middle of a ridiculous year for Swanson. Austin Riley, Matt Olson, D'Arnaud has power for a catcher. The bottom of this order has some power and speed as well with Ozuna, Duvall, Harris. So still a very high upside lineup here. From a DFS perspective, we have them pulling about 6% ownership, but a 7.5% chance of being the top scoring stack. So they still look pretty good in that regard. Nothing negative to say about Atlanta here other than, it sucks that they're missing Albies.
Favorite Braves bat?
Ronald Acuna?
Fair. I mean, the top of the order just looks great. My answer might be Austin Riley just because he's a third baseman instead of an outfielder, but we're splitting hairs here.
I was going to say after Acuna, it's probably Olsen because he's only 4,500 and I don't really know why.
That's fair too. No problem with any of those three bats. I'm going to, with Acuna's ownership being 16% and those other, everybody else that we just named being at like 6 or 7, I think it's a little bit easier to squeeze out less dupe out of Acuna, but I don't think any of those numbers are wrong. Do you want any Nats against Fried?
Not really. I mean, he's very good at limiting power. Doesn't walk a lot of guys. It's a 15-game slate. You're clearly never wrong going to like Nelson Cruz or Juan Soto, but outside of just randomly having them here or there, I don't anticipate targeting anything from Washington.
Man, how old is Nelson Cruz?
48.
Feels like it, right?
I think he's like 40.
I mean, like I'm leading it that direction.
He'll be 42 on July 1st.
Craziness.
He has been playing Major League. He debuted in the Major Leagues when I was 15.
Which was?
His first full season, I was 16.
Which year?
2005 was his debut. 2006 was his first full season.
That's when I got to college.
He won. He was on the Rangers World Series game against like Freeze and the Cardinals. I was in college. I remember watching it at a bar.
That's insane.
So I must have been like 21 or 22.
That's insane. Anything else? Nats, Braves.
His season with the Orioles was 8 years ago.
That's really crazy to think about.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's bonkers. Schedule for the rest of the day is quite easy. MLB Live Before Lock coming up next at 6 p.m. Eastern. You don't have to go anywhere. Just stay on this stream. MLB top stacks are free today, as are PGA top golfers. Great week for golf. I outlined the contests for the U.S. Open this week on DraftKings in the process video earlier today. Make sure you're checking that out. Really great payout structures in golf. Adam, are you playing golf this week?
Yeah. Playing golf this week, and then DraftKings is actually doing a pretty cool thing that I don't think they've done before. It's like an invite-only $2,000 buy-in, spans like the next 5 weeks of golf, and there's payouts based on like your overall finishes over those 5 weeks, and then also weekly. So looking forward to that. That should be fun.
Yeah, that'll be a good time. That's all I got in terms of schedule and free content. So let's keep it moving to your Baltimore Orioles. On the road, taking on the Blue Jays. Blue Jays 5.3 run implied total, 3.7 for the O's. Yusei Kikuchi for the Blue Jays, Jordan Lyles for Baltimore. No ownership coming to Lyles. Kikuchi is 10% owned, and as far as I'm concerned, that's about where it should be. I don't have much of a Kikuchi take.
I kind of like this lineup for him.
Okay. Talk to me about it.
It is very right-handed. It's still certainly a dangerous lineup, but 27% strikeout percentage against righties this year. It does have a 214 expected ISO, but it's just a little bit watered down because Anthony Santander didn't make the trip to Toronto. They called up Kyle Stowers to replace him, but apparently they're not going to have him face the lefty. So you get, normally you have the 1 through 6 from Baltimore that I think is pretty good, and then it drops off a little bit. Here you don't have Mancini, and you don't have Stowers/Santander. So after Mullins, Hayes, Mountcastle, Rutschman, Nevin, McKenna, Mateo, Chirinos, Martin, not exactly a group of guys that I'm nervous about taking a pitcher against.
No, the final 4 guys in that Orioles lineup via Steamer, weighted runs created plus 85, 72, 80, 80 is about as bad as it's going to get for a bottom 4 of a lineup.
Yeah, like Nevin at least has some power. Mateo has speed. Chirino's had power a few years ago, I guess, but like not the type of guys. When you have a pitcher like Kikuchi that either basically gives up a home run or strikes you out, the 5 through 9 in this order, well, the 6 through 9 in particular in this order, are just not guys that I'm afraid of.
You going to Lyles?
No, I don't think it's going to be really necessary on this slate.
I would imagine you're going to at least have some of the Blue Jays. They are 4th in aggregate ownership, 7th in our stack score, 5th in top stack. I actually have them 3rd, so I am interested in Toronto as well. Nothing too crazy from an ownership perspective. Only George Springer got to 10%. Technically speaking, I could round 2 other guys up, but we're not going to do that right now. How are you feeling about the Jays against Lyles?
Pretty good. I mean, so I don't think Lyles is like quite as bad as public perception probably makes him out to be, but he's certainly not good either. An 18% strikeout percentage against righties, 19% to lefties, 201 expected ISO to righties compared to only 115 actual so far this year. So that's a spot where you should expect him to regress going forward. Lefties have, lit him up, 240 expected ISO, 407 expected WOBA. So it is still a good spot. I guess my point was just kind of like, I feel like people just look at Lyles like he's a total gas can when really he's probably like, 3/4 of a gas can. But going up against this Toronto lineup, it doesn't really matter. There's just so much power in this lineup, a very high upside spot for them.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to get you a bunch of Toronto. Prices aren't all that problematic. And the guys that have the big prices are clearly bats that are worth those price tags. So who would be your favorite Blue Jays bat today?
Guerrero.
I think mine's Bichette.
Yeah, that's kind of what the hesitation was.
Yeah, I don't have much of a difference between the two.
As far as Arcathelza in chat said, I would watch out with Kikuchi. Sometimes those watered down lineups show up. Yeah, I mean, it's still a baseball game. Sometimes anything happens, but the idea is to kind of do the best you can to, predict what's going to happen. And facing a worse lineup is always going to be better than facing a not bad lineup.
Yeah, I mean, you would never play DFS if you have to be like, well, sometimes the bad guys suck. Like, the fuck are we going to do with that information? That doesn't help at all. Orioles bats against Kikuchi? Can you justify a stack of like most of the top of the lineup in one random idiot?
You can do it. Like Mullins, Hayes, Mountcastle, Rutschman, Nevin is fine. McKenna's 2K. Mateo's only 2,800, gives you plenty of speed. Martin's fast as well. Yeah, you can still do it. And then obviously you'll be able to get whatever you want in terms of pitching, whatever you want in terms of the rest of your one-offs. So, and Kikuchi is home run prone. This, I guess, goes more to Arcathelza's point. Yeah, like bad offenses still sometimes come through, and the Orioles do have good players 1 through 4, and then a bunch of cheap guys after that. So, if you want to get to the Orioles and take some shots and hope that, the home run prone Kikuchi shows up, that's fine. But on the Kikuchi side, you certainly shouldn't be looking at the Orioles and saying like, oh, well, sometimes bad players are better than good players.
Andrew Jennison said, Kikuchi has good stuff, just waiting for it to translate. Hasn't he been in the majors for like a really long time at this point?
Several seasons. And it has translated. Like he went from, he's basically a completely different pitcher than he was when he got here.
Yeah. Yeah, 4 years.
Yeah, I mean,
he's striking out 10 guys per 9 now in comparison to the 6.5 that he had in that first year.
Yeah. I'll say about a 25% strikeout percentage last year and this year so far. He walks too many guys, and that's been the issue ever since really that first year. And he gives up too many home runs.
56% increase in his strikeout rate from his first year to current, which is complete. It showed up. Stuff showed up. Walk rate got way worse, but that's whatever. Anything else here, J's or O's?
Terry said Kikuchi is not good. I'd fine to disagree there, but
I mean,
like he's fine.
I think it's a semantics argument on words. I think he's probably like an average starter.
Yeah, he's like an average pitcher. He has good strikeout stuff. He walks too many guys. He gives up too many homers.
Yeah. So like, I agree that he's not good because good implies better than average, but
he's certainly a major league pitcher, league starting pitcher.
That I completely agree with.
Like
there's a decent chance he's better served in the bullpen, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, but that's pretty much every starting pitcher.
Well, I don't mean like his rates will get better if he goes to the bullpen, because I agree that is everything.
Oh, you're saying
I mean like he might be like more uniquely set up to be a reliever than he is a starter because of his control issues.
Right, but like he's Like the first example I think of with that is like Jorge Lopez from the Orioles, who like when he would like he the first 4 innings of a start he'd be great, and then like the second, the third time through the order he would get lit up, and now he's just throwing 100 miles an hour out of the bullpen and being very very good. It's just a matter of like it's still hard to find five starters that are not markedly worse than Kikuchi on the same team.
Very true. We move it on. Red Sox and A's, 5.6 run implied total for the Red Sox, 3.9 for the A's. Nick Pivetta and Jared Koenig. At least I think it's Jared Koenig. It was for me earlier, but that's another one that I'm already doubting. So it is Jared Koenig. Nice. Pivetta, 9% owned on DraftKings, 5% owned on FanDuel. He's 8,900 on DK. Koenig not getting any love. I had Nick Pivetta come out of my sim at 10%, so I don't really have much to add here. I think he's properly owned.
For Pivetta?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe a little bit under-owned looking at the top pitchers tool, but more or less correct. Good matchup against Oakland for sure. He's a pitcher that is extremely volatile, but does have a 25% strikeout percentage this year. He has just been having a better season overall than you typically get. Just shy of 1 home run per 9 innings, 8.5% walk percentage, 3.92 xFIP. Oakland's one of the worst offenses in baseball. So, I think he's good. The real issue is that the price on Dylan Cease is just broken. So 8,900 for Pivetta looks good, but outside of ownership concerns, there's just no reason you're ever preferring him over Dylan Cease.
Agreed. I do need to hit on a super chat and just got this one from Jordan from the account Ban Sean V. Josh is the greatest. Adam is okay, I guess. Somebody found my burner.
Yeah, because no real person put that.
Unrelated, but I got to take 30 seconds because this is the first time I'm getting a chance to talk to you about it. Your response to the Darko graph last night was aces. Very good. Very happy to see that. I really needed my tweet to not be one in like two separate tweets where I was just like, just by the way, I don't actually think this. I
was extremely confused when by your tweet, just because we've done so many shows together where I know what like the first thing you look at is when somebody says this player is good, bad, worse, better.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm just like remembering this wrong. So I just pull up like the efficiency stats that you always look at immediately. And I'm like, this is not remotely close.
Yeah. Like a lot of the advanced plus minus, I know Darko is higher. I know like Rapham is higher and stuff for Tatum. There a lot of that's, the first team all NBA last season in comparison to Durant being second team. Like you can make a case for it. And I can't really disagree with any of the things that are going to come up on paper, but if you're asking me to choose which one I would want, I'm taking Kevin Durant at this particular moment. If I have to have the next 4 years, I'm taking Jason Tatum, obviously.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I would guess the time frame where Tatum surpasses Durant is like 1 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And speaking, currently, I'm not saying in 1 to 3 years, Tatum's going to be like a better NBA player than Durant was.
Yeah. Right. But yeah, I was just like, like you can make the case. I also don't want to make that case, but that tweet did not get seen. And then people were just destroying me, which wasn't fun. Any Jared Koenig thoughts?
Who is that is my first thought.
There you go. 18%.
I know he's 28 and he pitches for the A's, so he's probably not any good, but only 4 innings in the majors this year, 53 innings at AAA so far. Did post pretty good strikeout numbers there, but certainly not the type of guy that I would expect to do well in the majors. Steamer projects him for 6.87 strikeouts per 9 in the major leagues. Not the pedigree or anything that suggests he's going to be good.
Red Sox bats, 7th in aggregate ownership, 4th in our stack score, 4th in top stack score. Same for me. I think they are probably a team that I want to get to a little bit more than what we're seeing in particular. Sign me up for that 2, 3, 4, 5. Just a very, very difficult time through the order for Jared Koenig. What are you doing with Boston?
I think they look good here too. I mean, it's a pitcher that I don't expect to be good. Certainly hasn't proven anything in the majors. And Boston is projected to be a little bit under-owned. 5.5% top stack or ownership projection, 6% top stack percentage. So, on a 15-game slate, not a spot that stands out where like I expect to just be going crazy. Like I'm going to end up just getting exposure to enough offenses where it's not like I have tons of Boston probably, but I do think they're one of the more appealing stacks here, especially, the non-Coors Field game.
Best bat in the Red Sox lineup today. Story.
Wow, Rob Refsnyder leading off.
Yeah, 2,200. I mean, obviously he's easy to get to.
Yeah. Yeah, probably Story. I mean, honestly, it might still be Devers, but
we get an update in ownership recently? No. It's probably Story for me, but you can kind of just pick anybody out of Devers, Martinez, Bogarts, and Story, and I'm going to be real happy with that answer.
Yeah, agreed. Looking at the ownership, yeah, I mean, they're all pretty much the same.
Where are you at on the A's bats?
Not particularly interested. Pavetta's solid. The A's are bad. There's a lot of other offenses. Cheap Seth Brown batting cleanup, I think, is fine. Bethancourt with catcher eligibility hitting third is fine, but not much that I expect to get to here.
We move it on to the Detroit Tigers taking on the Chicago White Sox. 3.2 run implied total for the Tigers, 4.3 for the White Sox. Tyler Alexander, I believe that's another one where I never really confirmed what idiot is actually going to be out there. It's not him. Drew Hutchison going for the Tigers. Dylan Cease for the White Sox. The thing that matters most here is Dylan Cease, 8,800 and projected right now for 41% ownership. I like Cease today. I don't think 41% feels great. I see a couple options around him where I think I could offload a little bit, but to me, he's very clearly, for me, the second best pitching option on the slate.
I think he's the best. I mean, this is a complete mispricing.
You're saying relative to salary? You think he's the best?
Yeah, and it's not like, yes, and it's very close, even not relative to salary.
Okay, yeah, well, hit me with it then.
I mean, he's got the best strikeout percentage on the slate at almost 33%, 3.21 xFIP. The only thing he does wrong is he walks too many guys. He has a 12% walk percentage, but he's going up against a Detroit team that by far has the lowest WRC plus in the majors this year at 74. Their active roster has a 23.7% strikeout percentage, 6.6% walk percentage is, it looks like the the third lowest in baseball. Just not a team that's likely to take advantage of whatever control issues Cease has. And then you get this just complete mispricing at 8,800. So to me, he's someone where, like, on a 15-game slate, is any pitcher really likely to be 40+% a top two pitcher? No. But it's still one spot in your lineup. He's very, very likely to, even if he doesn't, put up a top one or two score. In baseball, you don't need the optimal lineup to win. You just need typically your pitchers to just, do good enough. And there's so much margin for error on an $8,800 price tag for Cease that even though he is, going over-owned, if you're just looking relative to top two percentage, when you factor in that value standpoint as well, it makes him look really good. Like I would expect that I get more Cease. I'd be more surprised if I'm underweight on Cease than if I'm underweight on Cole.
Okay. I mean, that doesn't really surprise me. I just 41% today just feels heavy, especially with the amount of guys that I see that I think just should be owned and are getting no ownership whatsoever. 40 just feels high. Like he showed up for me quite a bit lower than that, but still the second highest mark. So
yeah, it's just, there's so many ways to be different with offenses on a slate this big that
very true.
I'm typically like, if I have a stack that, across the board is a bunch of like 1, 2, 3% owned guys, and then, maybe I have a lower owned SP2 as well, it's kind of just like, why am I giving up the projection on Dylan Cease at this point when it would be different, if he were the same price as Cole and, you were just like arguing about the projection at the same price point, but there's just so much margin for error on him relative to other guys.
That's fair. Drew Hutchison, I don't believe is going to be in play. I don't think you need the 4K salary. Care to disagree?
I do not.
All righty. Then let's take a look at White Sox bats first. They are 10th in aggregate ownership, 10th in stack score. I have them ranked a little bit lower than our top stack tool does. This isn't really a spot that I'm all that interested in. And with a 4.3 run implied total on a slate where we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams at 5 or higher in my numbers, I don't really have as much interest in the White Sox as the field. Do you?
Not really. Like, I don't think it's a bad spot. You have Hutchison, and then I think it's supposed to be Tyler Alexander coming in after him. Neither guy is great. Alexander certainly gives up some power to right-handed bats, but overall, Chicago has been really disappointing this year. This lineup isn't great. Luis Roberts fine, Abreu is fine, Vaughn we know has power, but overall it's just kind of a weak lineup that is getting some ownership. I'm not telling anyone not to go to Chicago, but um, they look, I guess, similar relative to ownership as other teams like Boston and Atlanta that I like.
Okay. Tigers bats against Cease. Is there anything there for you? They do not exactly grade out well.
I have an extremely difficult time getting there, just for the same reason we said about Tampa against Cole. Even if they do ruin Dylan Cease's start and throw up like 5 runs or something, that's not winning you a slate. And Cease's biggest issue, again, is walks, which it's good. It gets you more at bats. It puts guys on base and all of that. But you really need home runs to win a tournament. And so if this were a smaller slate and you told me Cease was like 60 to 70% owned, maybe I start getting there. But on a slate like this, kind of like you were saying with Cole, it's going to be easier or you're perfectly fine just saying, like, okay, well, I don't have Cease. I would rather spend those bullets on teams that have a better chance of success at low ownership than the Tigers.
I would also be way more likely to take a shot against Cole when the bats are the Rays and they have, for me, an aggregate 119 weighted runs created plus. The Tigers have an aggregate 99 weighted runs created plus, which is one of like the 4 worst offenses on the slate. Not only would I be going up against what I believe is the second best pitcher on the slate, but I would also be doing it with like the ass end of the talent pool from an offense perspective. That just seems like a really tough battle. Like, right. The Rays are at least good.
Yeah. Or at least like average.
The Rays are at least better than the Tigers by quite a bit.
Yeah, like you're literally taking the worst offense in baseball and going up against the pitcher with the highest strikeout percentage on the slate, who's been extremely good and is a top pitching prospect. Not to say that it can't work out, but there's just better combinations of likelihood of success and still very low ownership that you can get to.
Steamer's aggregated ISO for the Tigers is dead last of any team on the slate today. Terry lets us know that Detroit's active roster is 30th in ISO, weighted runs created plus, and home runs against righties. So I assume we'll be seeing the Tigers put 15 runs on the board today.
Right. Yeah. Not looking at splits, but their active roster right now, their ISO is 0.093.
That seems bad.
The next lowest is 130.
Is that bad? I can't tell.
Yeah. It's getting pretty close to, I think, if you just ran 9 pitchers out there and told them to hit.
Favorite bat for the White Sox?
Luis Robert. Actually, probably Pollock leading off at 3,800.
Yeah, there's a lot of similar stuff there. Pollock, Vaughn. I'd probably rather have Vaughn over Pollock, but it's close.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Mets and Brewers. That's not highlighted correctly. Mets 4.4 run implied total. Brewers 3.6. Chris Bassett and Adrian Hauser. No one's touching Hauser, but Chris Bassett is your 3rd most owned pitcher for today. I don't really have any disagreements here. I don't mind this strikeout matchup at all. 22% ownership isn't all that crazy, and at 8,200, it's not even all that rough of a price tag. So I'm going to happily get to some Bassett.
Yeah, pretty good spot for Bassett. Milwaukee's active roster has been slightly below average in WRC plus at 96. 24% strikeout percentage. Bassett is a solid pitcher. 25% strikeout percentage, 3.8 xFIP so far this season. He has been home run prone, but he looks pretty good at this price tag. I think he's underpriced here as well. Not as much as Cease, but still certainly looks good at this price tag. Like, you can make some very high upside lineups where you pair Dylan Cease and Chris Bassett.
Absolutely.
And one other thing to mention there,
a ton of money to go around too.
Yeah, and one thing to mention there, because obviously both guys are pulling ownership. Cease is projected to be the most popular player. Bassett is 3rd. But when you have like Garrett Cole getting 34%, Logan Webb getting 19%, if you pair Cease and Bassett, they are combining for ownership, but you're still automatically avoiding 34% of the field right there. So that's kind of the other thing to keep in mind is like, and it's why we talk so much about your lineup as a whole and the ownership going to it and it being relative to other potential lineups. You do want to keep in mind that like you're still just avoiding 34% of the field right out of the gate, even by pairing 2 of the most popular pitchers on the slate.
Anything else you want to touch on here with regards to Bassett?
No.
So Brewers bats are, do you have any Adrian Hauser thoughts? I guess I need to ask.
I do not. He's
good.
just kind of there, not somebody that I think we really need today.
Okay, good. Brewers are 28th in ownership. They are 18th in our top stack tool. Are you going to try to get to anything on the opposite side of Bassett?
I don't really think so. I did mention that he's given up some power this year. Milwaukee has some. I mean, you have Yelich leading off at 4K flat. Adames is in the lineup. Tellez is only 3,400, but there's nothing that really looks that good to me here, especially in the context of this slate.
All right. Well, then talk to me a little bit about the Mets. We have them right now 21st in top stack, 15th in ownership. Are you getting to that side of the game, or is the only thing that exists here Chris Bassett?
Mostly Bassett, but I will say I do like getting to the Mets when they're low owned. We only have them pulling about 2% ownership here, only about a 2% top stack percentage as well. But their active roster does have the highest WRC plus in baseball. Middle of the pack in terms of ISO, though, at 153. And Hauser certainly isn't a bad pitcher. He's a better real life pitcher than he is DFS pitcher. He does typically do a pretty good job of limiting hard contact, keeping the ball on the ground. 184 expected ISO allowed the lefties, 175 to righties so far this year. Certainly not going to be upset if I get to some Mets stacks, but I have a hard time thinking they're going to be a priority.
Okie doke. Favorite Mets bat?
3,700 Nimmo.
Agreed.
Can you talk
spot
for a minute? I need to plug my laptop in. I didn't realize that it wasn't.
What a genius. Yes, I can. Do you know why? Because this is the perfect time to talk a little bit about the presenting sponsor of this show, and that would be Odds Shopper. Guys, I go on this rant pretty regularly when I talk about Odds Shopper, but it doesn't make it any less true. If you're betting on sports and not using Odds Shopper, you're making a gigantic mistake. Just simply being able to shop around for different lines at different sports books is going to save you money long term. And none of that affects anyone other than you. By not shopping around for the best line, you are just taking money out of your own pocket. You can use Odds Shopper to do that. It costs you absolutely nothing. It's free. You have to sign up. We want your email address. We're not going to lie, but it costs you nothing to be a part of it. And we're not even talking about the best details here for Odds Shopper, which I believe is the way that we document all of the player props. You can immediately see the projection, all of the lines for props, the expected ROI, the expected win percentage. All of this data is at your fingertips at Odds Shopper. And like I mentioned before, it is completely free. Sports betting is getting rolled out more and more frequently across this entire great nation. And as it happens, more and more people are going to need resources like this. Get it, take advantage now, get used to Odds Shopper now, because the tools are going to build out bigger and bigger and bigger. And you should just want to use them because they're going to help you. I promise. You good?
Yeah.
You should try to get yourself a desktop computer for right there.
What do I want that for? I have the computer that you told me to buy.
Oh, well, you should have two of them. I've got two of them right here. There's a laptop, not even being used, just sitting here.
Yeah, I don't need that.
You can never have too many computers. There are 4 computers in my office right now, 2 of which just sit in a closet.
Yeah, there's one.
Cardinals and Pirates. 5.3 run implied total for the Cardinals, 3.7 for the Pirates. Miles Michaelis going for St. Louis, Bryce Wilson for the Pirates. I don't believe that you'll be rostering Bryce Wilson, and judging on every other time we've done shows, I don't get the sense that you're going to be rostering Miles Michaelis here either.
I am actually kind of interested in Michaelis.
Okay.
Only because in this price range, like he's pulling 6% ownership. Bassett's at 22, Cease at 41. I certainly think Cease and Bassett should be more expensive, or should be more popular. Pivetta, a little bit more popular, and I think that's deserved as well. But Michaelis is at least somebody where he's a decent real life pitcher. The Pirates are a horrible offense. If you do have a popular team, or you're just for whatever reason getting away from Cease / Bassett, Michaelis at least does still have a path to success here in this price range. But I certainly don't like him as much as those other 3 guys that offer more in the way of strikeouts.
Okay. Yeah, he's not a guy that I anticipate getting to, and he used to be a guy that I anticipated getting to pretty regularly. Pirates are 11th in ownership, 12th in stack odds. Cardinals are 6th and 8th. I guess I'm going to start with the Cardinals here. You looking to target Bryce Wilson? That implied run total looks pretty good.
Yeah, kind of surprised that. Wait, you said St. Louis was what in ownership?
They were sixth.
Yeah. I was thinking the opposite direction. Okay. Yeah, they I think look pretty correctly owned. Not a bad spot against Wilson, not a bad offense by any stretch, but you just have so many good offenses to choose from. And when St. Louis is getting similar ownership as Atlanta against the guy pitching for Washington, as Boston against Koenig, as Toronto against Lyles, I'm probably going to be getting to those teams first.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same spot here. I had them ranked a little bit lower than our top stack tool does. Clearly I'm happy to get to, like Nolan Gorman at 3,800. That price tag really works. I'll happily get to, your Paul Goldschmidts, your Arenados. Tyler O'Neill at 3,200 is pulling a bunch of ownership. He's 3,200. That's probably why. So I don't really have anything crazy to say. I'll certainly have some Cardinals, not a lot. Do you get to the Pirates at all? They are a really solid value team. They don't look very great as a top stack.
Yeah, and typically when that happens for me, I don't get to a lot just because they are very low in top stack percentage. They are a good value. They're not getting a lot of ownership either, only about 2%. But it's just, I think the pitching is cheap enough today. There's enough good mid-range pitching where I'm not going to have too much difficulty finding value, and getting to the Pirates just isn't going to be something I prioritize. Not to mention Michaelis is a good pitcher. He's got about a 20% strikeout percentage, so he's not your favorite DFS guy, but in terms of just actual ability to get outs, he certainly isn't bad. So not a ton of interest in Pittsburgh for me.
Okay. Favorite Pirates bet?
Reynolds.
Yeah, probably. I'm with you. Anything else here? Cards or Pirates?
Nope.
Okay. Moving pretty good here. We've got 27 minutes to go before live lock. Sorry for anybody that I just gave a panic attack to before lock. 526 viewers in here right now. 100 likes on the dot. Not nearly enough. Hit that thumbs up. Bump those likes up. That will help us out quite a bit. Cubs and Padres. This is a game I'm very interested in getting your thoughts in. Kyle Hendricks and Sean Manaea in this one. 5.1 run implied total for the Cubs, 5.8 for the Padres. Hendricks not owned, 6,200. I'm pretty positive you're not going to Kyle Hendricks. Sean Manaea, 8,500 projected for 5% ownership. Obviously, the wind does not appear to be helping things in this matchup today, but I want to know, do you have interest in Sean Manaea at that ownership?
Yes, in the sense where I think he should be more than 5% owned. We have
he's owned less than Miles Michaelis.
Right. His strikeout stuff is good. This isn't a bad strikeout matchup either. He comes in today with a 3.65 xFIP, 25.6% strikeout percentage. The ownership is low because of the weather, and it drives up the implied run total and all of that. As a result, the projection gets driven down. The other reason I think it's going to be difficult to get to Manaea is that not only do you have Cease and Bassett, but you already have that tier where you do have Pivetta getting 8% ownership. You have Michaelis getting about 6%. So there's plenty of pitchers in here that you can get to, whether you're just looking for the best projection, whether you're looking for an ownership discount. But that being said, Manaea is certainly a viable one as well if you are looking to get a pitcher that simply has a high ceiling and is not named Dylan Cease or Chris Bassett.
Yeah, I have quite a bit of interest in Manaea today just because of that ownership. When this works out well, the things that he does and the matchup for strikeouts don't really affect you. If I think Sean Manaea can get a bunch of extra strikeouts in a matchup where he's underowned, those strikeouts don't suddenly become fly balls that get caught in the wind. I need the kind of outs that don't matter for how windy it is. That's the path of success.
Right. It's just a really, really volatile spot that would be less volatile if the weather were in Manaea's favor. But that's a good point. If you're taking somebody, no matter what the weather's doing, Sean Manaea is not going to project for the same strikeouts as Dylan Cease is against the Detroit Tigers. Right. And if Sean Manaea goes out there and just starts mowing guys down, it doesn't matter what the weather's doing because the ball's not being hit. The only way in that situation that the weather still sort of matters is he walks two guys and gives up a pop-up home run and loses 6 points. But realistically, if he's doing what you would really like him to do strikeout wise, the weather is a minor factor.
This is a big factor for bats in this game. The Padres, aggressively owned, number one stack in our stack score. The Cubs, pretty aggressively owned as well. I mean, nothing crazy like until you start looking at some of the individuals, but lots and lots and lots of ownership going to the Pods. A couple guys getting a lot of ownership for Chicago. Let's just start with San Diego. How are you going to manage them?
Yeah, it's obviously a good spot. I mean, Kyle Hendricks has appeared to finally stopped being magically good at pitching and has kind of just fallen off. But it's still just a team getting a ton of ownership on a slate with 30 offenses. I mean, when you look at the ownership projection here, 16% aggregate ownership going to the Padres, and that's across the board. The lowest owned hitter, the lowest ownership projection for a Padres hitter is Ha-Seong Kim at 13%. So this isn't an example of a team where you can just say, oh, well, I won't play Manny Machado and I'll 5-man stack them with low owned guys. That doesn't exist here. There's just so many good opportunities that are going to be a lot lower owned that typically it just ends up being a team I don't play a lot of, even though it is very obviously a good spot. They very obviously project very well.
How do you generally handle situations like this on, 15 game slates where you have a chalky team like this for the Padres? Like, do you end up getting less stacks overall? Do you limit them in any way to just being like one-offs or, two-man stacks? Like, does it change your distinction in the way that you build?
No. Like it kind of naturally happens most of the time, but like I don't do anything manually to make it work out differently. A lot of times I'll end up getting them as like 3-man stacks or 2-mans or one-offs, like you said, because it puts you in a situation where, like, if you already have a low-owned stack, you have low-owned pitching, whatever, there's no real reason at that point that I don't want Manny Machado or that I don't want, Luke Voit at 3,400 or whatever the case may be. And it still puts you in a situation where you're somewhat contrarian because such a high percentage of the Padres ownership is going to be in, 5-man stacks or 4-man stacks or something like that. If you just have Machado, like, even if Machado is 16% owned, you have him as a one-off, he hits 2 home runs, but the Padres as a whole fail. There's still going to be plenty of teams that have Machado. Like, obviously you're still going to need whatever stack you played did really well, but it's kind of misleading when you just look at the ownership because such a high percentage of that is going to be like, oh, well, Machado hit 2 home runs, but we also have 3 hitters that combined for 10 points because the Padres as a whole didn't do anything else. So I certainly don't mind getting those guys individually or in mini stacks. I would expect that I don't have a lot of full Padres stacks here just because of the number of other options.
Are you more interested in the Cubs bats?
I mean, yes and no. I still think that they're over-owned here. They're obviously not getting as much ownership as the Padres are. Contreras makes a lot of sense at 4,500, but he's getting 20% ownership. Patrick Wisdom's at 15%. The rest of the team is lower owned, but they're also not very good, and they're facing a good pitcher in Manaea. So when you look at Chicago as a whole, 9% aggregate ownership, 4% chance of being the top stack. Even if you account for the fact that aggregate ownership is including Contreras and Wisdom, you're still talking about 9% ownership going to Happ, 9% to Schwindel, 7% to Gomes. So I kind of just assume that I get more Atlanta, Boston, Toronto, teams like that.
I find the Cubs to be like not all that interesting, which is kind of surprising because they are a team that I tend to get a lot of on days where they're not getting a lot of ownership. They did not grade out all that well for me. And I don't really get the sense that I'm going to be getting to the ownership. I'd be more likely to eat the ownership of the Padres. That's where it starts to get weird. Like, is 15, let's just say it's 15% aggregate on the Pods. Is that really all that high? Like, do we over care about that sometimes?
What was your question?
Is 15, let's just say that the Padres aggregate ownership is 15%. Do we overthink that that's high? I know that, like, we talked a little bit about it in the NBA. We watched some of the videos. It was like one of the high stakes videos or something where some people were like basically ignoring ownership, which I could see in the NBA, different sort of setup. You can get better things in baseball in this regard, but like, should we even care that 15% aggregate ownership is like, we consider it chalky because it's the top, but should we care at all?
So, like, if I'm understanding what you're asking, right? I don't. It's kind of hard to answer. Like, and we were kind of talking about this with like Cease, where he's really popular, but I don't care that much because like it's one piece. The issue I run into with stacks is that it's half of your lineup. Like if you're 5-man stacking and you're playing 10 guys, it becomes more difficult to differentiate with those 5 other spots than it is when you talk about a pitcher with 9 other spots, or in basketball where, you have 8 total roster spots. And yeah, the best value guy is probably overowned in terms of his actual chances of success versus his ownership, but he's still by far the most likely guy to succeed, and it's taking up one spot of your lineup, so you just deal with it. That's kind of the issue for me is, if I could, I wouldn't care that much that the Padres are getting 16% ownership, even if I think it's a little high, because I do think that they are really good values. But when I only have 5 other spots in my lineup to differentiate with, it makes it more difficult to end up winning a tournament, I think.
I've just been thinking about it a little bit more and just wondering, when we get those individual bats that get to 40% ownership or something, when the slate's a little bit smaller, that's where I start to think okay, I can see where that's the spot. There's not going to be all that much difference between that guy and insert third baseman here that projects very similarly. But on days like today, where the chalkiest bat for the Padres lineup is 18%, I don't know if I necessarily should even care.
It's all relative.
I don't know where the break point is. You know what I mean?
This is why I think comparing lineups to each other is so important, as opposed to just saying, oh, he's popular, he's not popular, whatever.
You could always obviously put together a very good full 5-man Padres stack and just simply have Max Fried, and I'm not going to say Sean Manaea in this case because he's got quirks, but just pick anybody else then. Logan Gilbert, Logan Webb, Pivetta, whatever. That's enough right there, I think.
Yeah, but it's still just, when you compare them to a team like Atlanta or a team like Toronto, realistically, the Padres aren't much better, if any better, here.
So I completely agree with that. Our top stack odds have it a bit more extreme.
Yeah. And so you're still getting a pretty massive discount. You're going to get twice the ownership probably going to San Diego. And so obviously it's still just that much easier to win if you're on the team that isn't the one that's twice as popular. Even looking at the top stack odds, the math still bears out. 11% chance of being the top stack for San Diego compared to 7.5 for Atlanta, but they're getting 2.5 times as much ownership.
Yeah. Look, just for the record to everybody, I'm just throwing this out there. I understand that I'm going to play other teams that I think are slightly worse than the Padres at significantly less ownership. Baseball is just a completely different thing. It's just good to talk about from time to time.
I agree with what you're saying too, in the sense where raw ownership doesn't matter nearly as much on larger slates. That's the case in basketball. It's the case in every sport. The more spread out ownership is going to be, the less that you're going to just say I'm not playing this guy at that ownership level. Yeah. But it's still all relative, because the field is still going to favor their top 1 or 2 projected spots. And so really the way I think about it is more, you can get these Blue Jays stacks at 5-6% ownership, or 7% ownership, the Red Sox at 5%, when if this slate were smaller, the Padres would be 30 instead of 16, but these teams would also be 15 or 16. So you're still just getting, it's all relative. And again, I think that's why comparing lineups and keeping everything relative is more important than, what happens so frequently in chat, where it's oh, he's X% owned, I can't play him, without considering his chances of success relative to the field, what your lineups can look like with or without the guy. So that's really where it comes down to me. I certainly don't care that Manny Machado is 16% owned. I care that he's 16% owned, and I can roster somebody else that is basically the same for 5 or 6%.
Absolutely. It's a good discussion point. I think it's good to have those kind of discussions, because if this were an 8-game slate, the idea talking about the chalkiest team on the slate is a very, very, very different exercise than when you're doing it on a 15-game or a 30-team slate. 18% ownership is just not chalk. Garrett Cole, Dylan Cease, that's the chalk of the day. There's not really anything else that's battling those two guys out. Rangers and Astros. 4.1 run implied total for the Rangers, 4.5 for the Astros. Dane Dunning, Jose Urquidy. Dunning not getting any love, Urquidy getting about 5% ownership. I don't see a huge separation between these two guys, but at the same time, I'm not all that enamored in either. If I got a little bit of Urquidy, it'd be fine, but these are just not priority arms to me.
Yeah, neither one's a priority for me either. And a lot of that just has to do with how much value there is elsewhere, not only in pitching, but, obviously I just said that I don't expect to get a lot of 5-man San Diego stacks, but that's just the first team off the top of my head that, stands out as a really good value. The Indians or Guardians are cheap. And, they have the same issues that the Padres do. But the point is, there's a lot of ways to build good lineups without having to go down to cheap pitching on this slate. And the mid-range pitching is so strong that it makes it pretty difficult for me.
I don't have anything else to add for either one of these guys. They're obviously low priority arms, but let's talk about the bats. Rangers are 10th in ownership. Astros are 17th. Neither team is in the top 10 in terms of stacks. Are you prioritizing literally anything in this game?
I'm pretty interested in getting to Houston just because they're Houston. I do have respect for Dane Dunning as a pitcher. Only a 142 expected ISO allowed to righties this year, a bit higher to lefties at 190, but it's just a really high upside Astros team. So that does make me interested. I mean, Alvarez, Tucker, Bregman, Brantley, Altuve, that's a lot of upside. So on the one hand, you're getting Boston, Atlanta, Toronto in clearly better spots at modest ownership. But Houston's the first team, like if you sort by top stack percentage, they're the first team that really just jumps out as far as like nobody is playing these guys.
Yeah, they are Alvarez at 4.2% ownership. Everybody else is basically unowned. Very easy to get to if you want to do it. Let me just grab this most recent crunch I just ran just to update data a little bit in front of me. We have 5 games to go, 13 minutes to do it. I need to just shut up and keep going. But I do know from doing this show earlier today that there are a couple landmines as we go. This one's not a land. Do you have anything else you want to touch on for Rangers or Astros? I think we're kind of just done with that game.
Yeah, pretty good there. Cole Calhoun batting cleanup at 4K seems fine.
Okay. Did I just do this again? That's wrong. Why is that still happening? I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Rockies and Guardians. This is going to be a big one. Rockies 4.9 run implied total. Guardians 6.1. Antonio Senzatella and Shane Bieber. No ownership at all going to Senzatella. My question to you is this. Do you have interest in Shane Bieber, who is also unowned? To me, he's basically like a slightly more expensive Sean Manaea today.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. The biggest issue that I have with getting to Bieber here is the price tag relative to that entire group. It's not like you're just comparing him to one guy, but you're paying a premium to get him over, or, to get him over at all but at least one, or at most one, of Bassett, Cease, Manaea, Pivetta. If he were in that price range, I would really like Bieber here. As is, I still don't mind him in tournaments. I guess it's more similar to a pivot off of like Logan Gilbert at 9,200 than it is Dylan Cease. But a lot of the same points as Manaea. It's probably going to be difficult to get a lot of him just because there are pitchers that certainly project a lot better. And then there's also a tier of pitchers that are cheaper and already not getting much ownership that project well. But Bieber's still a good pitcher. He's facing a not very good Rockies team. The only thing, and it's a big thing, working against him is Coors Field. But when everyone is aware of that, and as a result, Shane Bieber is projected for 1% ownership, the market has corrected and you can go right back to playing Shane Bieber.
I'm not going to ask you at all about Senzatella. So Guardians bats, very highly ranked today, top stack, second in stack score, second in ownership. How are you handling Cleveland, and how do you handle them in relationship to San Diego?
I was going to say, in a lot of respects, probably rinse and repeat to San Diego, but they do appear to be a little bit more favorable just in that we have them with a 15% top stack percentage and 15% ownership, as opposed to having San Diego projected to be a little bit more popular and a little bit less likely to succeed. So kind of like when we had talked about with San Diego, and I said that a lot of times I'll end up getting, mini stacks or one-offs. It's probably more likely I end up doing that with Cleveland than I do with San Diego. I haven't built lineups yet, but I think there's a pretty good chance that I end up just like not really getting to San Diego and then mixing in Cleveland guys with lower owned stacks pretty frequently. You are getting 24% ownership going to Jose Ramirez, 21% going to Gonzalez at 2,900. I don't know why we continue to price guys this cheap in Coors Field, no matter who they are. But outside of that, they actually, in some spots, are lower owned than the Padres. When you look at Steven Kwan, Austin Hedges, Owen Miller, Josh Naylor at only 10%. And then even guys like Rosario Jimenez and Straw are pretty comparable to the Padres. So I do think between the two, I prefer Cleveland.
Yeah, Cleveland's just really weird. They're like the Padres, everybody was basically the same ownership. And this is now like 27, 27, 27, 8, 8, 8. And like you're getting to the same sort of answer in a different way. How about the Rockies, though? Like, do you have interest in attacking Bieber? I don't really have a lot of love for Colorado here, but they're not priced like they're playing in Colorado.
Yeah, not a ton of interest. It is a tough spot, but 3% top stack percentage, 2% aggregate ownership. They're okay, but there's still just other teams I like so much more.
Favorite Rockies bat?
McMahon at 3,900, I guess.
Fair enough.
They're a team where it's really difficult for me to point to someone I actually like. It's more so like get 5 of them and hope Shane Bieber's arm falls off kind of thing.
Diamondbacks and Reds, 4.4 run implied total for the D-backs, 4.2 for the Reds. Zach Davies and Tyler Mahle. Is there pitching here for you? Is Mahle just a value guy that you'll get to a little bit?
Tyler Mahle's kind of interesting to me. He's only projected for 6% ownership. He's got the 4th highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 25.8%, giving up about a home run per 9 innings. He walks too many guys. He has a 4.06 xFIP. I get all of that, but he's not expensive. He's only 7,500. That's a really cheap price tag for the amount of strikeout upside he offers, going up against an Arizona team that has a 24% strikeout percentage on their active roster. So he is kind of appealing to me as a paid-on option in tournaments.
Okay. You're not going to Zach Davies, correct?
I'm good.
Reds bats are 12th in ownership. Diamondbacks are 16th. Both teams are in the mid-tier of top stack odds. They just seem like they exist and they're not priorities. Is there anything that you're seeing for either one of these teams?
No, they're just kind of there. It's favorable. It's a favorable park as long as the roof's open. Davies doesn't miss bats, but there's just not much that stands out from Cincinnati individually that makes me think I'm going to be driven there.
Okay. I don't have anything else that I want to say about this game. I knew it was a quick one to get through. It's just like it might be one of the least appealing overall games on the slate.
Yeah, I agree.
Giants and Royals. Definitely got to get to a little bit of this one. 5.1 run implied total for the Giants, 3.3 for the Royals. Logan Webb and Chris Bubich. No ownership going to Bubich. Logan Webb, about 10% owned. I agree with it. I think he looks, pretty similar to Pivetta. Little bit worse than Gilbert, but not all that different. This whole range sort of just looks comparable. What do you want to do with Webb? Great spot to be, that's for sure.
Yeah, and a solid pitcher as well. This season, his strikeout stuff's down to 20%, but he still has a 3.29 xFIP. Still just a good pitcher, good park, all of that. Kansas City's been one of the worst offenses in baseball pretty much all season long. Their active roster, 93 WRC plus, only a 19% strikeout percentage. I think Webb looks good. 9,100. I don't have really any issues there. 10% ownership looks fine. Seems pretty much correct to me.
Okay. Bubich.
I've been rostering him way too much this year. I don't think this is a spot that I'm going to end up needing to do it. There's just enough value elsewhere. Is he underpriced at $5,400? Sure. No starting pitcher should be that price. He at least has some semblance of talent as well, even if Kansas City's doing everything that they can to ruin it. But San Francisco is a good offense, and it just ends up being a matter of he's a good point per dollar, maybe he has a good point per dollar game, but does it really matter when there's so much value elsewhere and he could just be, Tyler Mahle for 2K more, and at least you're getting more strikeout upside.
You're not rostering Royals bats, correct?
Correct.
Giants bats, 7th in aggregate ownership, 5th in stack score. They're top 10 in top stack, top 10 in top value. I don't like them as much as a top stack tool just because I don't really love getting to this park all that frequently. Where do you land on the Giants here? Because this seems like a team that I'm going to avoid, but I think they look a little bit better on our data.
I mean, they've been a really good offense. It's not a bad spot. Right now we have them projected for 5% ownership, 4%. There's 3.5% chance of being the top stack. Given that ownership, I probably don't get to a ton. Like, it doesn't really make them stand out. But if that ownership were to come down a little bit, it's certainly not an offense that I mind getting to against Bubich.
Okay. Favorite Giants bat? I think they all look identical.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Flores?
Yeah, first, third probably helps. 2 to go. Mariners and Twins, 3.8 run implied total for the Mariners, 3.7 for the Twins. I'm quite confident we're not getting to bats here, but who knows? Logan Gilbert for the Mariners, Joe Ryan for the Twins. Is it Joe Ryan? I feel like that ownership being wrong is going to tell me that it's not him. I also don't know how long he can go in this game. Joe Ryan, it is. Okay. Logan Gilbert's like 15% owned. That's where I have him at this point in time. I think he's basically properly owned in this spot. Joe Ryan pulling no ownership. I don't really have much of an idea how deep he's going to go into the game. So hit me with your thoughts on Gilbert and then Ryan, if you have any.
So Gilbert getting ownership is kind of interesting to me. Not because I don't think that he should be. He's a very good pitching prospect. He's been solid so far, 24.5% strikeout percentage, 3.8 xFIP. Minnesota does have some strikeouts on their roster as well, but they're also just overall a good team. 117 WRC plus, 161 ISO, 21.9% strikeout percentage on their active roster. Kind of seems to me like a spot where the field has just sort of chosen Logan Gilbert to be the guy that gets ownership there. He's getting more than Webb. He's getting, more than Pivetta. He's getting more than Michaelis, obviously more than Manaea, more than Bieber. I think he's fine. It's kind of surprising to me that he's getting more than the whole group as opposed to just like everybody kind of being comparable.
I don't have much of a separation for any of these guys. They all look really, really similar. And nobody's owned enough that like I care, other than Cease and Cole. Like nobody's owned enough where I'm going to create like any sort of legitimate leverage either direction. 28th in ownership for the Mariners bats, 24th for the Twins. They are dead last and 26th in stack score. Are there stacks here for you?
It's tough. I mean, so if we're talking about the popular pitchers, who would I stack against first? It's probably Gilbert. Minnesota against Gilbert, but that's still not to say that I expect to be getting there. There's just so many other offenses.
And then we close it out with Dodgers and Angels. 5-run implied total for the Dodgers, 3.6 for the Angels. Tony Gonsolin and Noah Syndergaard. 1% ownership going to Gonsolin, and then that is it. I think he's a little bit better than a 1%er, but nothing too crazy. I don't really want Gonsolin or Syndergaard. How much Syndergaard do you want?
Yeah, he's my favorite. No, I mean, if I were to get to one, it's probably Gonsolin and just, hope for the best. But even that, I think I'd just rather go to Bieber if I'm looking for an unknown guy in that price range.
Fried too. Same scenario for me as well. So I don't really have anything else to say about the pitching. Can certainly talk about the bats where the Dodgers are 8th in top stack, 19th in stack score, though. Very expensive stack, at least at the top. 11th in ownership. I think the Dodgers are a little underrepresented for today.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to push me too hard to want to take a good offense against Noah Syndergaard. Syndergaard is a fine pitcher, I guess, maybe at this point. But he's certainly dropped off in terms of his strikeout stuff at the very least. 15.5% strikeout percentage, 4.35 xFIP. Still not giving up power, but also still can't control base runners either. And so with a team like with a team like the Dodgers, first of all, you get a team that can just hit the hell out of Syndergaard. Like he's not missing bats. To lefties this year, he's allowed a .088 ISO. His expected ISO is about 100 points higher. So you can just certainly get there by the Dodgers offense doing what the Dodgers offense does. But also anybody that gets on base is running on this guy. And so it just gives you so much upside when you don't only need home runs. You can just get on base and it's like a double or a triple at the very least. So I like getting to the Dodgers. I pretty much always like getting the teams against Syndergaard for the stolen bases, but the Dodgers kind of make it even a stronger case because they're just such a good offense in general.
Angels bats?
Much
I think
more
they're
difficult
getting screwed a little bit here. I don't understand their implied total. This lineup's sort of better than it should be.
I mean, if Ward is back and Rendon is back, then they're certainly getting back to at least like a functional major league offense. The problem before was just like you have Trout and Ohtani who are otherworldly, and then you just have like a AAA team. Getting back Ward, who at least so far this year has been one of the best hitters in baseball. Getting back Rendon, who should at least be an above average hitter, certainly makes them a little bit deeper. I still have a hard time getting to them though. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Gonsolin. I don't see anything that really stands out other than, the fact that the top of this order has two of the best hitters to play baseball.
Yeah, they're a big positive leverage team for me, given where their current ownership is, assuming Ward and Rendon are in this lineup. I have their aggregate weighted runs created plus at 119. It's not all that far behind the Dodgers, oddly enough. Velasquez brings it down a little bit, or it'll be even closer. So I'm anxious to see where this ends up. This could be a team that I'm taking a shot on that's getting just no love whatsoever. Favorite stacks before we get out of here?
Let me refresh the ownership. I think like Atlanta, Toronto, Boston.
Okay. Favorite pitchers?
Actually, Toronto's ownership came up or their top stack percentage went down a little bit. But it still looks like Atlanta, Boston. I still like Toronto, but I'll throw like Houston and the Dodgers in there too. Favorite pitchers: Cease, Bassett, Pivetta. I like living in that price range.
All righty. That'll do it, folks. Thank you for being here. Please hit that like button right now. Shouts to OddsShopper for sponsoring this. Remember, we are Stokastic. Awesemo.com. Hit the bricks. New name. We're working it into everything else we've got at this point. Don't go anywhere. Live before lock. Coming up next. Taking you all the way up to 7:05. Good luck, everybody. I will talk to you again tomorrow.
All right, it is that time once again. What's up, everybody? Ben Razza here for OddsShopper, bringing you my best bet of the day, Tuesday, June 14th, from across the sports world. We've got a lot to get to today, including recapping the Boston Celtics from last night. 18 turnovers. Had their chances, had it in range. Terrible fourth quarter. Could not get it done for us. That was a disappointing effort. They're going to have to win, hold serve at home, and then hopefully win in Game 7. We will be talking about that in just a couple days. But we turn the page for today. Hopefully you took advantage. If you used the Celtics during the FanDuel offer as your $5 bet, you still won your $200 in free bets. If you didn't take advantage of that, if you don't know what that is, this is the offer. You've got to go to the app, use the link in the description of this video. And what FanDuel is doing, if you deposit $10 or more and you bet $5 on anything, you are guaranteed, win or lose, to get $200 in free bets. That is the offer they have. It is running out of time. This is going to expire soon. You're going to be seeing something different coming up. So you want to take advantage of this now. If you haven't, if you want the $200 free dollars, this is the time to do it. Now, where are we going in the sports world? Well, the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs, finals, I should say, don't get started till tomorrow. The NBA's got a little break. I almost went to the soccer world, but you know I love golf. It's the US Open. Let's find some golf bets. One of my favorite bets always is make or miss the cut. Going to a miss the cut here, and I got a couple reasons why. And sorry, picking on KH Lee to miss the cut this week at the US Open at -112. I know that's rather obscure, but as we've talked about on these videos, sometimes more obscure the better. We've talked about that with college baseball and some of these other things. We are going for where the value is, and I believe there is value here. The most important thing, if you're unfamiliar with the US Open, it's a slightly different format. Top 60 and ties in this full 156-man field. So this is an incredibly difficult cut to make for everybody, not just KH Lee. It's just a tough format. Now, let's talk about KH Lee's golf game. Well, credit to him. This is a proven winner on the PGA Tour. He has shown he can do that. He has won in 2021, and he just won last month at the Byron Nelson, where he loves apparently that course because he won it 2 years in a row. But we don't care about upside. We care about consistency. And this is still a player who has missed 4 of his last 8 cuts. So he's been kind of rotating in made cuts, missed cuts. The strokes gain data is not overly impressive. Iron specialist at times, but when he doesn't have the irons dialed in, the around the green game is not a strength. It's not a glaring weakness either. It's just kind of neutral, and the putter comes and goes. Off the tee, he's lost in 3 of his last 5 events. That is something at the country club that if you do and you're in this thick rough, you have practically no chance to get it on these greens. So I do think that KH Lee's game doesn't exactly translate to U.S. Opens. Now, we do have some evidence that that is the case. KH Lee has played in the U.S. Open 3 times in his career. He is 0 for 3 in making the cut. Now, there are a couple caveats that, of course, it's different courses. And 2, I do believe that KH Lee is a better player right now than some of those appearances. Having said that, I still believe that what this course is going to test him in terms of the around the green, in terms of the off the tee, keeping it on these fairways and not getting into the fescue, into the deep, deep rough, that is going to be ultimately what causes his demise. I do not see KH Lee getting through in what is going to be just a very difficult cut. I like a lot of these made-miss cuts. I think there's some big opportunities here. This one was my favorite, though, at -112. We are practically getting a toss-up here. I'm going to say that KH Lee has a short week at the country club and does not make this cut. If you want more information on the U.S. Open, we have got you covered on this very channel. If you're hopping in for the first time and you like what you see and you want more information, all you got to do is press subscribe, join the channel, join the community. We are marching towards 10,000 subs on this channel. Thanks again for everyone for watching. Good luck. Enjoy the U.S. Open. And of course, I will be back tomorrow with another play. Talk to you guys then.
Going on, everybody? It's the MLB Live Before Lock Show. I'm here joined by Neil Orfield. Both of us, our first time doing a stochastic show, as if it makes any difference. It's just a name, so nothing has actually changed at all, but the name is slightly different, so it is my first time technically doing a show with the new name, and there is nobody I would rather do this show with that's named Neil Orfield than you, Neil Orfield. So, Neil, what's going on?
You're giving me the Jordan Klein treatment. I'm the best Neil Orfield. Yeah, that's fair. I'm stoked. This is fantastic. I'm feeling stochastic right now, ready to do this 30-game MLB slate. I didn't even know that there were 60 teams in MLB, but I'm looking through the sheet today. We got 30 games on the slate, so I'm excited to do it.
All right, let's have a bombastic show. So it will start because we only have 53 minutes left here, and I want to try to hit on as many of the pertinent pitchers and stacks as we can. And obviously, we can't talk through every single spot, but I think what we do want to do is try to answer any questions anybody has, and then really highlight the things that we are getting the most exposure to. And I think where we should really be starting here is at pitcher and where the field is getting the most exposure. And there's two really popular pitching options today over on DK. We've got Garrett Cole and Dylan Cease. Over on FanDuel, same exact thing. Garrett Cole projected for 25% ownership. Dylan Cease projected for 25% ownership. So let's start by talking about Garrett Cole, the more expensive of the two pitchers. He's coming off a horrific start against the Minnesota Twins. I believe you're Minnesota Twins, if I'm not mistaken. Yourself and Eric. So in that game, he did not give up one homer to start the game. He didn't give up two, 3 homers to start the game. And Cole was like 60% on that slate. My night ended very quickly that time out. But how do you view Garrett Cole tonight? Big slate, 15 games. So like I said, 36% projected ownership on DK, 25% on FanDuel. So he's going to be popular, but it's not, as popular as we see on some of the smaller slates when it comes to chalk pitching. But how do you like the spot for him against Tampa Bay relative to his ownership?
He's Garrett Cole, and luckily for him, he doesn't have to face the dominant Minnesota Twins lineup every game. He gets a big downgrade here playing against the Rays. I'm kidding. He's Garrett Cole. You can always play Garrett Cole. He is the safest option on the board. I'm going to be getting to plenty of Garrett Cole. I'll be coming in under the field. He's looking a little bit over-owned in the top pitchers tool, coming in at 35.6% ownership on DraftKings with a 21.4% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate. Just a little bit over-owned, but I'm not going to be well under the field. He's Garrett Cole. What else can I say? He's got a 30% strikeout rate. He's one of the best pitchers in the game. It's not the best matchup in the board in the world against Tampa, but it's still a winnable matchup for Garrett Cole. So I don't really know how deep you need to get into with Garrett Cole. He's one of the best pitchers in the game. I think the last game was kind of an outlier. So I'm plenty happy getting to a little bit under the field on Garrett Cole. But even if you wanted to get above the field on Garrett Cole, I don't think that's necessarily wrong. He's I'd say by far the safest pitcher on the board. I guess Dylan Cease is not far behind him in terms of top 2 pitcher odds at a much cheaper price tag, but he's still he's one of the best pitchers in the game. Play some Garrett Cole if you have the salary.
Yeah, and we've got a message in chat here from Jordan, not Jordan Klein, different Jordan, saying Buxton homered already. I mean, that was more or less how the Garrett Cole start went last time out. I opened up my app. It was like, oh, cool, the slate's over. I could go do other things. And we were like 8 minutes in, and I went into town. It started raining. I got wet. I walked. So it was the whole night was a disaster. But today, hoping for better things. Also, my current build, I'm around even with the field on Garrett Cole. He's not going to be somebody that makes or breaks my night. Obviously, he's in a third of my lineup. So it's not that I'm not invested in him, but it's not that much different than the field. So I think relative to the size of the slate, it's hard to totally get away from them, but there are some pivot options to get to. And that's where I want to lead you down next before we talk about Dylan Cease is if you are paying up for a pitcher who is not Garrett who do you view as being a somewhat contrarian option that we could use to maybe make some lineups a little bit less chalky?
Contrarian option. So we're not talking Dylan Cease here. Interesting.
And by the way, it's nobody. If you want to say nobody, that's a valid answer. If you just say like, "Hey, I'd rather save money at pitcher in some of my non-Cole lineups."
Yeah, Let me sort by sorry. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody here. I mean, anybody basically, just a little bit cheaper. Tony Gonzalez is only getting 1.2% ownership with a 10.4% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the board. That is very contrarian and pretty decent odds of being one of the top 2 pitchers on the board. Max Fried, 7.4% ownership, not as contrarian as Tony Gonzalez, but 10.2% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the board. That's not too bad. I mean, Logan Gilbert is actually going a little bit over owned, but he's still a fine option against my Minnesota Twins, coming in at 14.5% ownership, 12.5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the board. I mean, really, you look at any of these guys, if you just want to get away from Garrett Cole and spread out your ownership elsewhere, all of these guys are getting half the ownership of Garrett Cole, less than half of the ownership of Garrett Cole for the most part, but have only half the odds of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate. So all of these guys look pretty good in terms of their ownership relative to odds of success here. But really, I don't think you need to. Miles Michaelis jumps out at me. Sean Manaea both look very good at, Michaelis has 5.4% projected ownership, 9.9% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. Manaea, 4.7% ownership, 9.6% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. Chris Bassett, I guess he's getting 20.8% ownership, so he's not so contrarian there. But I think that there are a lot of viable options, none of them as safe as Garrett Cole, obviously, but in the above $8,000 range, there's nobody who is as expensive as Garrett Cole. I guess Max Fried is the next best real pay up option. But if you have the salary, if you have 10,500 left over, just play Garrett Cole. I think that I would just go there if I have that salary. I'm not going to pay down to be contrarian in this spot, but I think it makes sense to kind of spread out. I'm not going to be playing. I wouldn't play Garrett Cole in all of your lineups necessarily, unless you're only playing a handful.
So I am going to echo your sentiments when it comes to Tony Gonzalez. 1% owned over on DraftKings. On FanDuel, we have Gonzalez projected for, where's Gonzalez? 0.5% ownership. So the matchup against the Angels, it's a bad matchup in terms of ease of difficulty. It's a good matchup in terms of upside, which is really what we care most about in tournaments, because the Angels have a good offense against right-handed pitching, but the one bugaboo they strike out a shit ton. So 25.9% strikeout rate for the Los Angeles Angels. All 80 of the teams in the MLB are playing on tonight's slate. Of all those 80 teams, the Los Angeles Angels have the highest strikeout rate at that 25% clip. So they swing and miss a whole bunch against right-handed pitching. And to me, in the past, I never played Tony Gonzalez. I always thought he was a good pitcher, but there just wasn't that much upside because he didn't work deep into games. But it's different this year. Here are his recent starts: 6 innings, 6 innings, 6 innings, 6 innings, 6 innings, and he's going around 90 pitches in most of these starts now. So I think that we're getting a little more length out of Gonzalez. Not that he's going to pitch 8 or 9 innings or anything, but if we're going to get 6+ for him at 1% ownership on 1% ownership on DK, 0.5% on FanDuel, I think it's a good pivot play. Like you mentioned, some of the data we have in the tools, his projected odds of being the top scoring pitcher on the slate, or one of the top 2 scoring, it's far greater than 1%. So like the positive leverage we're getting there, and you could play any kind of offense, anything else in your lineup. If you have Gonzalez in it, it's kind of contrarian by default because he's so low owned. You could play the most popular stacks on the slate. You have Gonzalez in there. You've differentiated yourself. So I really do like Gonzalez for that reason. I'm going to agree with you that that's my favorite pivot option. But now let's move down to Dylan Cease. And I want to know how you're going to be approaching him. I know you called Garrett Cole the safest pitcher on the slate. I'm going to lead towards Dylan Cease as being the safest pitcher. And it's for a couple reasons. Number one, I mean, we just saw Garrett Cole give up a million runs in the first inning against the Minnesota Twins. So it's not to say that he isn't safe, because he is, but it's hard for me to really be that comfortable with somebody against Tampa Rays when they just scored -9 fantasy points, and they're also going to be massively popular. But I just like the matchup Dylan Cease has against the Detroit Tigers. Detroit is, I'm pretty sure, last in baseball in WRC plus against right-handed pitching. Let me check to make sure that is, they're last actually by a significant margin. There are 2 teams in baseball with a WRC plus under 80 against right-handed pitching. The Oakland A's at 75, and then the Detroit Tigers at 67. They also have a pretty significant 24.7% K rate. They suck against right-handed pitching. I know Dylan Cease has had some command issues as of late. There have been walk problems. His pitch count has gotten up there, so it's limited some of his depth into games. I'm not too concerned. His price has come down a little bit. 96 on FanDuel. Over on DraftKings, he is 88, which is also really reasonable salaries for a pitcher like Dylan Cease, who has as much strikeout upside as he does. So Dylan Cease is my most rostered pitcher on the slate. How are you going to approach him when the price tag is right, the matchup is right, but he's also incredibly popular?
Yeah, it's tough because I agree with you. So I take it back, the Garrett Cole being the safest play on the board comment, because Dylan Cease is, Garrett Cole is a 21.4% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. Dylan Cease is 21.0. So he's right behind him in terms of top 2 pitcher odds, and he's $1,700 cheaper. So the matchup is obviously better against Detroit. He's got a 15% chance of being a top 2 point per dollar pitcher on the slate. So yeah, there is a lot of reason to like Dylan Cease. I am going to be under the field. I believe I'll reach my cap, my 30% cap. I think I'm just setting a 30% cap across the board on pitchers. And that means for a guy like Dylan Cease, who is just so clearly better than his salary, I'm going to get 30% of him. And I do that intentionally. That's like, I'm getting a higher percentage than his actual top 2 pitcher odds, but still I'm coming in underweight to the field, and I'm happy with that because there are other pitchers kind of in his price range that I have interest in. Actually, let me resort by salary, but there are a lot of pitchers right around there that I kind of like. So Dylan Cease is 8,800. I wouldn't mind getting to some shares of Joe Ryan at 8,700 against Seattle. I don't know how deep into the game he's going to pitch, but I think I'd like to take some shots there. We've got Nick Pivetta up against Oakland in a great matchup at 8,900. Logan Webb against Kansas City, Logan Gilbert against the Twins. There's just so many other pitchers around him. And then you go down. Sean Manaea, I really like at 8,500. Miles Michaelis at 8,400. Chris Bassett at 8,200. Even Kikuchi at 8,000 against Baltimore. It's just, there are so many pitchers in good spots today that I don't really want to be matching the field when the field is getting to 44% Dylan Cease. So yeah, I'm still going to get a fair amount because I like to differentiate more with my bats, but I think I do want to come in under the field just because I think there are so many other high upside pitchers in kind of the same price range. Where do you think you're going to end up on Cease today?
I'm a little bit overweight to him right now on DraftKings, and I'm only playing on DK today. I didn't make FanDuel lineups. It's just hard to do live before lock and play 15 games late for me anyway on multiple sites. Maybe you were capable of pulling it off, but
no, I'm bad too.
Yeah, so it's just one site for me. I'm not a mastermind like Eric Lindquist, who plays on a lot of slates, or EMAC.
And that's why you and I never end up crying on screen.
No. Also, because we're more well-balanced human beings. But also, when it comes to EMAC, not only will he play on 2 sites, EMAC will play on 6 different sites. He's playing 8 different sports when he's doing live before lock. His computer never works. So it's so much stuff going on. But that's why he's running for president in 2024, and he's going to be our next president. But anyway, in terms of Dylan Cease for DK purposes, yeah, I'm still overweight to the field. I have him in a little more than half my lineups. I just really like the price and the matchup he has against the Detroit Tigers. I'm going a little bit more contrarian with some of my offensive plays today, and that really enables me to get to Dylan Cease as my most rostered starting pitcher, and I don't have too many concerns with it.
Yeah, I think that's a totally fine approach too, because he's this, as you said, and as I corrected too, he is the safest pitcher on the board. The price is just too good for him. He's got major upside and a relatively high floor against Detroit too. So I think it makes perfect sense to go overweight too. It's just, I'm taking an underweight approach just because of the other pitchers that I like on the slate, but I totally understand going overweight too.
All right, we got some.
You're just reading Eric's. Okay. I thought you were just reading Eric's comments.
Yeah, we've got Eric in here. He's as per usual. Sometimes he gets a little upset about the things that I say about him on the programs from time to time. He always knows though. If you say Eric's name, he always pops up. He's like Beetlejuice. You say Eric 3 times in a row, he just pops up in chat. But here he is. He's here. He's responding. We're also trying to figure out, what is Awesome Yo going to do with his name? Is he going to be Stochastic Yo? Because the reason he was Awesome Yo is because that's what his friends called him in high school.
Yeah, because he's from Philly, and he used to always say, "That's awesome, yo." Like that was just like a saying
he's told you the same. He's told you.
He told me the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
He is a producer of High Stakes, so I work with Mike regularly. So I've heard the story. But is he going to change it to stochastic yo? Is he going to start saying, "Hey, that's stochastic yo"? I don't know.
We'll have to find out. This is the real drama involved with our YouTube show. So all the reason you guys should also be liking the video and subscribing to the YouTube channel, because it's the only way you're going to find out whether Mike Lawrence is changing his YouTube handle or not. Super chat from Brian Rizza. Who do you like better matchup and to win game? Cincinnati, Tyler Mahle, or Houston, Jose Urquidy? All right. So who has, if I'm understanding this correctly, who do we like better between Tyler Mahle and Jose Urquidy? Just based on strikeout upside, Tyler Mahle. I've hardly ever play Jose Urquidy for DFS purposes. I know he had that one weird outlier game where he struck everybody out, but in general, he doesn't generate swing and misses, and he kind of allows a lot of hard contact, gives up some runs. So I'd rather roster Tyler Mahle if you're just looking for upside. How about you, Neil? Mahle or Urquidy?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I kind of like Tyler Mahle today. I think it's a pretty solid matchup with Arizona. 5.6% projected ownership, 7.7% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 10.6% chance of being a top 2 value pitcher. The one thing I will say about Urquidy is, so was that a DFS question or was it a betting question? I thought you said it was in terms of getting the win, which maybe
it was
betting.
hard to. It was kind of hard to. He didn't really say. I just kind of interpreted it as a DFS question.
If it's a DFS question, the one thing I will say for Urquidy is he is 6,400, so he has a 15.8% chance of being a top 2 point per dollar pitcher on the slate, which is higher than Mahle. But yeah, in a vacuum, if you have the salary, I prefer Mahle.
In terms of who's more likely to win, the Houston Astros are playing the Texas Rangers and the Cincinnati Reds are the Cincinnati Reds. So right. I know that they have a pretty easy matchup against the Cardinals, but with that, against the Diamondbacks, but I saw Arizona in front of me. So sometimes, the mind leaps to football, but the Houston Astros are significantly better than the Cincinnati Reds. So the Astros are bigger favorites than what the Reds are. So I'd say the Astros are more likely to win, but answer that question in 2 different ways, because not entirely sure how Brian meant it. Next super chat to get to from our friend, Oliver Closeoff. He wants to know Gonzalez or the Biebs with an otherwise chalky lineup. So we've not really talked about Shane Bieber at all. And I was a little skeptical about Bieber earlier in the year. I changed my tune with him a little bit. The velocity is certainly down since undergoing shoulder surgery, but he's worked around it. He's been really good. But he's pitching at Coors Field today. Before we talked about the merits of playing Tony Gonzalez, he is my favorite contrarian pay-up pitching option. So my answer here is going to be Gonzalez. But how do you feel about Shane Bieber, who's pitching in Coors Field, but has also produced really good results as of late?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because of the chalkiness in the rest of his lineup part. And Bieber is coming in lower owned than Tony Gonzalez at 0.5% projected ownership. I still think that I lean Gonzalez just because he has better odds of being a top 2 pitcher. It feels safer to me. The floor feels a lot higher to me than Shane Bieber. It makes it a toss-up. If the rest of your lineup is really chalky, Bieber still 0.5% projected ownership, 7.3% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. That's in Coors Field. But Shane Bieber, if you're missing bats, it doesn't really matter where you are. So he has pretty high odds of success. I think I lean Gonzalez, but it is close. My dog is trying to get out of my office.
Is that what it was? I was like, how come your door's opening itself? Because I'm like 80% sure my house is haunted, but I was trying to figure what's going on in Neil's house.
This house was built in like 1915. So I always wonder, it could be haunted. Wouldn't be that shocking. I'm going to let my dog, I assume my wife just got home, so I'm going to let him out of here.
All right, this is exciting stuff.
Never mind. She let him out of here already.
Oh, okay.
I didn't realize that the door opened. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah.
Oh. What kind of dog do you have?
So we adopted him year and a half ago, and he was around 7 years old. We don't know his actual necessarily. We think that he is a Maltese mix of some sort. He's like a 15-pound little white dog. Yeah.
I've never heard somebody describe their dog. What kind of dog do you have? White one. It's like what flavor Starburst do you like? The yellow?
Adoption papers were like, we think he's a Maltese, but he's mixed with something else. We don't really know. So he's one of those little white yippy dogs. He's got kind of a deep bark though. So he's not really like yippy in the sense that a lot of those little white dogs are, but yeah, he's a little white dog with with a deep bark.
Sean V Stan account in the YouTube chat. There's a new YouTube handle. Greg's house is haunted by the ghost of Juan Toscano Anderson. Might as well be. If it wasn't for him, maybe I'd be living in a house that didn't require as much work as it did. I don't like any Juan Toscano Anderson at all. Let's get back to talking about some of the pitchers on the slate. And, we've talked about the chalkier options. We've gone over Garrett Cole. We've gone over Dylan Cease. We've talked about some of the contrarian options. Is there anything more in the mid-range that you find yourself gravitating towards? Because while Cease is certainly underpriced on DraftKings, he's still 8,800. And if you're paying up for offense, it's not necessarily going to be all that easy to go to Cole and Cease in the same lineup. So is there anybody in like the lower 8K to 7K range that stands out to you for today?
Yeah, so in the lower 8K range, I've sort of already mentioned, I like all of Sean Manaea. I have some interest in 4.7% ownership, 9.6% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. I'll sign up for that. Miles Mikolas against Pittsburgh. That's a great matchup for a very good pitcher. 5.4% projected ownership, 9.9% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. So I have interest in Miles Mikolas. Chris Bassett, coming in a little bit over-owned, but I don't think he's so over-owned that you can't go there if you have 8,200 left in your lineup. He's coming in at 20.8% projected ownership. He still has a 12.4% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the board, though. I have plenty of interest in Bassett. Even Yasai Kikuchi doesn't look amazing in the tools, 10.5% projected ownership with a 6.5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the board, but it's a matchup with Baltimore. He has been a competent pitcher for a number of years now, so I think that I'm totally fine getting to Kikuchi. I don't know that I love Corey Kluber in a matchup with the Yankees. He still looks fine in the tools, but I don't know that you necessarily need to get there in this kind of high risk situation. You think you'll be getting to any Kluber?
No. So Corey, number one, it's a matchup against the Yankees, and the Yankees offense has been so absurd this year. They also got Giancarlo Stanton back from the injured list recently, so that's another boost. Aaron Judge seems to homer every single game at this point. And I get it. Kluber's delivered fairly good results this year. It's been a little bit of a resurgent year for him. He is, 36 years old. But at the same point in time also, we've seen a dip in his strikeout rate. He's only striking out 22.4% of the hitters he's faced. That's his lowest strikeout rate since he first broke into the year. We haven't seen him below that number since 2012. And then the other thing to consider too with Corey Kluber at age 36, the velocity's down. He's only throwing 90.2 miles per hour. He's also outperforming his peripheral stats, 3.88 ERA, but a 4.3 expected ERA. Projection systems aren't all super high on him going forward. The consensus is that he's going to be a guy with an ERA over 4 to finish out the season. So to me, I think there are spots where he could play Kluber, smaller slates, spots where he's in a more positive matchup. Against the Yankees, that's just going to be a no-go for me.
Yeah, it's just too thin of a play. So I think I'm on the same page as you there in terms of Kluber. I think we both said, if I'm understanding your response to the super chat, Tyler Mahle is somebody that I have some interest in this matchup with Arizona. It's not just him versus Urquidy. Just even aside from that, I like Tyler Mahle in this matchup with Arizona. I have some interest there at only 5.6% ownership. I think that basically does it. Maybe you could play Adrian Hauser just fine. I don't have a ton of interest there. Dane Dunning looks kind of interesting. He's a pretty good pitcher, but it's a tough matchup with Houston, so I don't love it. I think that basically closes out my interest. Do you have any interest in anybody else, or do you have any extra interest in any of those pitchers in that range?
Tyler Mahle is the one that stands out to me for a couple of reasons. Number one, we talked I can't remember who the pitcher was that was in question where I was talking about the Arizona Diamondbacks offense, but there's a lot of power in the Diamondbacks offense. But at the same time, too, there's strikeouts to be had, and it's still a below average team based on WRC plus over the course of the season. So there's certainly some risk involved in terms of rostering pitchers against the Diamondbacks, but I also think there's upside to be had there. And this is a really cheap price point for Tyler Mahle when he's only $7,500 over on DK. And then, even with him over on FanDuel, where Mahle is 8,600, it's not my favorite play on the slate, but I still think it's viable even on a single pitcher site, just because of the strikeout upside we get with Mahle, where he has a 25.8% K rate this year for his career. We've seen him in the neighborhood like 25 to 28% strikeout rates. Now, I know a lot of people are going to look at his ERA and be concerned because he does have a 5.07 ERA, but here's the main reason: 63.6% strand rate. He's just been really, really unlucky in terms of sequencing. And we finally kind of started to see him turn the page with that. I think it was last time out, if I'm not mistaken, with him. He pitched, yeah. So last time out, it was actually same matchup against the Arizona Diamondbacks. 6 innings, 10 strikeouts for Molly. That was a season high for him with 10 Ks. And I think this is, once again, just a matchup where Molly could find success. There's strikeout upside. I think we're going to see some positive regression for him in the ERA number. So if I'm rostering anybody on DK in that 7K range, let's call it, he's my favorite one. Is that fair to say? Anybody who's priced between 7 and 8K, Molly would be your number one go-to?
Yeah, he been my number one. If you include Kikuchi, even if you include Kikuchi, I'd say Molly is my number one there.
All right, we've got a follow-up super chat from Brian Rizza, who has the best DFS pick on home run on FanDuel to hit home run tonight, and your top 4 players to hit a home run. All right, so here I'm going to do this in a very well in terms of just individual. I mean, are we weighing price point? Because or else it's just going to be like Aaron Judge and all the best hitters, Coors Field. But I'll go to some of our tools and I'll tell you which players we have projected as the most likely to hit a home run. While we are looking that up, or while I'm looking it up anyway, do you find much of a need to go really cheap at starting pitching today? Because when we get these 15 game slates, here's often how my builds work out. Is there might be guys for cheap in like the 6K range on DK or really cheap on FanDuel that I think makes sense. But ultimately what happens then is the lineups start to come out. I start to build my lineups. You get somebody like Rob Refsnyder's leading off for the Red Sox and is really cheap. And you just get these cheap hitters that are in pretty good spots that are easy to plug in and then also enable me to pay up for pitcher that I just don't get to very many cheap pitchers all that often on 15 game slates. But is there anybody that really stands out to you on a slate of this size that you do like getting to a decent amount for a cheap salary?
Yeah, so I think I'm largely with you that it's not totally necessary to go below that Tyler Mahle range. As far as pitchers that I have some interest in, actually Jose Urquidy looks okay if you want to get down there at 6,400. It's a solid matchup with Texas. He's not a pitcher with a ton of upside. It'd really just be the only real reason that I could say that it might interest me to get to some of these cheap pitchers is that some of my favorite stacks on the board today are more expensive teams. So, I like Boston, I like the Dodgers. So if you want to stack up a couple of those more expensive stacks and not use Rob Refsnyder, if you want to use, some of the better bats from those stacks, I think that it might make sense to pay down in some lineups for some of these cheap pitchers. So if you want to do that, Jose Urquidy looks fine. Trevor Rogers looks okay, coming in at just 2.3% projected ownership with a 15.4% chance of being one of the top 2 points per dollar pitchers on the slate on DraftKings. You could get there. You could pay all the way down for Chris Bubich, who is 0.5% projected ownership with a 12.5% chance of being a top 2 value point per dollar pitcher on the slate. I think that's just because of he is the cheapest viable pitcher today. So that generally you get a little bit of a bump to your odds there. But yeah, I don't think that it's something that I would necessarily recommend doing a ton. But if you really want to stack up, the best hitters from Boston and the Dodgers, you could go to Trevor Rogers, Jose Urquidy. There, some of these pitchers have some merit to playing them. And Dane Dunning, even in a tough matchup with Houston, I have some interest. I just think he has, some talent, maybe among the best talent of those cheaper pitchers. But yeah, I won't be doing it a ton.
All right, I've got an answer for Brian's super chat. These are the players that, per our projections, are the 4 most likely to homer today. No surprise. Number 1, Aaron Judge. Number 2, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Number 3, Byron Buxton. No surprises yet. Number 4, though, Patrick Wisdom. That's a little bit surprising to me. Now, with that said, Patrick Wisdom has had a very good season at the plate, and he also has a really low home run prop. Like, I would never bet this in a million years, but Patrick Wisdom at Sportsbooks is plus 225 to homer today. Terrible bet. Don't be betting Patrick Wisdom at 2-1 odds to homer. But at the same time, too, we look at some of his numbers for the year, 110 WRC plus. He's hit 12 homers to this point in 57 games, favorable hitting conditions at Wrigley Field. So we currently have him as our 4th most likely player to homer. So Brian, to reiterate those names, if I could find the tab I'd open, here we go. Aaron Judge, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Byron Buxton, Patrick Wisdom. Those are the 4 players we have projected as the most likely to homer. Do you have any other points you want to bring up from a pitching standpoint, Neil?
As Sorry, I'm responding to somebody in chat. I don't know. No, I think that we've essentially covered everything we need to cover. We basically covered the whole range of pitchers, and I think we covered it pretty comprehensively.
All right, so I'm going to pull up Odd Shopper, and I'll see where we currently stand with our number one best bet of the day. And by the way, if you guys want to use Odd Shopper, it's free to use. All you have to do is enter an email address, then you sign up for it, free access to our projections. And if you're interested in sports betting, this is the easiest way to do it. You plug in the Odd Shopper. Well, you don't plug anything in. You just sign in. You go over to Odd Shopper. It takes like 10 seconds. The read says 30 seconds, but it's BS. We're really underselling ourselves here. You just go there. It takes 5 seconds, look at the board and see as the top projected players. So the number one bet that we have on the board right now is Joe Ryan over 4.5 strikeouts. I understand why he'd be projected this way. I also think his pitch count is really difficult to project. We haven't seen Joe Ryan pitch in about a month at the major league level. His last minor league start, he was limited to around 40 pitches. So I wouldn't feel totally comfortable betting it. I understand our projections shouted out as a good bet. But one that I think that does make sense is Garrett Cole under 8.5 strikeouts. It's just such a high strikeout prop for a guy who's been pretty high variance this year. He's been all over the place, is coming off a weak start, has a tough matchup against the Rays. Now, this doesn't mean that Garrett Cole isn't a good play for DFS, but just an 8.5 strikeout prop is a massively high number. We have the under winning 73% of the time. So that is a prop bet that I could get behind. But now let's move on over to talking about some of the stacks, Neil. And I want to start by asking you this. If you were playing a single lineup today, single entry player, and you could only make one stack, which team would you be choosing?
All right. So for me, it's going to come down to either the Braves, the Red Sox. Man, I had a better answer this earlier. I have some interest in the Dodgers. It might be the Dodgers. Man, it might be the Dodgers. I just think that the Dodgers are too good to be coming in at 2.9% projected ownership. So if I'm making a single entry, at this point, I probably start with, no, it's Atlanta. Atlanta first, and then the Dodgers. Atlanta will be my top stack. Coming in at just 6% projected ownership with an 8.5% chance of being the top stack on the board. I think that it's a great spot for Atlanta. Too low owned just because they haven't announced who's pitching. We're assuming it's what's his name? The same pitcher who was supposed to play last night, right? It's
so pitching tonight in that game. Let's see if we have a confirmed starter for the Nationals. It is Jackson Tetrialt is going to be pitching for them.
Okay, yeah, that is not who I thought was pitching. I thought it was going to be Josiah Gray pitching for Washington.
No, it appears that we have Jackson Tetrialt. So let's look up some info.
I know nothing about Jackson Tetrialt. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I have no clue if I've pronounced his name correctly or not. If I'm not, apologize to the Tetrialt family here. But Jackson Tetrialt, I'm pulling up some of his data right here, so we'll have a little bit of a talking point in terms of what to expect out of him. First thing that's a red flag for me. 26 years old, making a major league debut. Never a great thing when somebody is a not particularly well-regarded pitching prospect. And I know some people in the chat are calling it a bullpen game. Perhaps, but Tetrialt's minor league starts, he's gone as deep as 6 innings. I think they could get extended innings out of him. You know why they're probably not going to get extended innings out of him, though? Because I don't think he's any good. So here's something else that kind of stands out to me about his minor league numbers. Not only is he 26 years old, never been pitching at the big league level, he's a non-heralded prospect, and his minor league numbers suck this year. He has made 12 starts in AAA. He's a 4.19 ERA, a 5.25 FIP. His strikeout rate, not great, 20.9%. I have no clue how this guy landed on the big league roster. It does not appear that he's good at all. So if this is actually who it is going to be pitching for them, Jackson Tetrialt, which this isn't 100% confirmed, but this seems to be who's pitching. I do not think this guy is good. And the Braves offense has been absurdly good over the last month. A little bit of a downgrade for them because Ozzie Albies broke his foot yesterday, but he's usually more of a threat anyway against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching. This seems like a dude in Jackson Tetrialt that we could pick on, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. So I could get behind that for sure.
Yeah, and if it is a bullpen game, the Washington has a 4.46 bullpen ERA on the year, just not a great bullpen behind him either. So we've got a bad starter, bad opener if it is a bullpen game, and then we've got the rest of the bullpen not great behind him. So that just makes me like Atlanta all the more. Really, I would say Atlanta is my favorite spot on the day. They would be my first stack in a single entry. Is it any different for you? Who do you think you'd be playing if you have just one entry? Who's the first stack you go to?
And by the way, Jackson Tetriot has been confirmed as the starter today, but that doesn't mean that he's guaranteed to go any length into the game.
Right.
It could pitch 2 innings, could pitch 3. Ideally, for our purposes, he'll go ahead and pitch 3 innings, but only not because of any kind of restriction, because he goes out and gives up 7 runs and you just can't go all that deep into the game. So I think that makes sense. And I do wonder if people are going to ultimately not be super high on the Braves because they don't know anything about the Washington pitcher. But I totally agree with you. I think the Braves make a whole bunch of sense as a stack in this spot. The other one, also a team that you briefly talked about, the Boston Red Sox, because they're going up against another pitcher who's an unheralded pitcher who's making his second big league start. So the first start for Jared Koenig didn't go well. Pitched 4 innings, gave up 4 runs. So his numbers, as they stand now, ERA of 9, expected ERA of 8.1. Here's something else that really stands out to me about that start. Average fastball velocity, 89.5. There is no way this guy is going to have a successful big league career when he's throwing 89.5 miles per hour. There isn't even that much minor league data on him. He's only pitched in the minor leagues this year and last year. That's really weird. How could he be? Did he convert from a position player or something? Because how could he be 28 years old with only a year and a half of minor league data?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Let's do some digging into Jared Koenig. I'm gonna do a Google search here. I mean, because it would be weird if he just picked up pitching baseball when it maybe pitched overseas, right? That would make sense.
Yeah, that could be it.
So he has been pitching he's been pitching in the independent league baseball. Well, that's a red flag. Do you have an independent league team near you?
I don't know if the Saints at one point were independent league, but they are now affiliated with the Twins. So I don't believe so.
Yeah. So we had, near me, I had the Somerset Patriots, and they were an independent league team, but they're now the Yankees AA team. That aside, though, somebody who's been pitching in independent league until they were 27 years old, that doesn't seem all that great. And then you find out he's throwing below 90 miles per hour. So I like the Red Sox a lot. Those are my 2 favorite stacks to roster in single entry. It's the Red Sox and it's the Braves. I think those 2 make a whole bunch of sense. Seems like we're aligned on that. Anything else that's a really high priority stack for you today on the high end?
Yeah, I mean, the Dodgers, I have a lot of interest in a matchup with Noah Syndergaard coming in at only 2.9% projected ownership with a 3.6% chance of being the top stack on the board. They're obviously expensive, so it's a pay up to be contrarian spot, but I would say that the Dodgers are probably my 3rd favorite team. Maybe Houston. I mean, Houston always good. I said that I have some interest in Dane Dunning potentially, but it's hard just because Houston is so good and Dane Dunning has not really been consistent so far this year. So I do have some interest in Houston at Texas. Even with the roof closed, it's still a spot that I'm willing to go. Coming in at 2% projected ownership with a 4.2% chance of being the top stack on the board. I do have some interest there as well. Do you have interest in either of these Coors teams? Any significant interest? I mean, I guess obviously we have to talk about Cleveland. So the next talking point I want to hit on is what we're going to do with these uber popular teams. So at Coors Field, we have the Cleveland Guardians, massively popular against Antonio Senzatella. Senzatella has been absolute dog shit this year. He stinks. And his pitching profile is so bad for Coors Field because he generates no strikeouts. He gives up a lot of contact. There's a lot of hard contact. And if you're not striking guys out of Coors Field, it's nearly going to be impossible to find success. So I don't know why he's still sticking around at the big league level. Here's the positive for the Cleveland Guardians. They're not really that crazy high owned considering the spot. A lot of these times in these Coors Field games, I'm kind of like, I'll look elsewhere with my stack. I don't think I'm going to be, overweight to them, but I'm not that far off from the field either because they're projected for 14.5% ownership, 13.6% chance to be a top stack. It's not crazy Coors Field ownership for the spot against Antonio Senzatella. I'm actually a little surprised that the Padres are this much more popular against Kyle Hendricks
than the Guardians are against Antonio Senzatella. So I do have reservations about going to the San Diego chalk because they're projected for nearly 20% ownership over on DraftKings. So by far the most popular team on DK. Like nobody's even close to them. And then over on FanDuel, we have them projected for, let me refresh, make sure I'm looking at the most recent numbers. Yeah, also the most popular chalk on FanDuel by a really wide margin, 19% on DraftKings, 17.5% on FanDuel. I'm just going to cross my fingers and hope the Padres are not the nuts today, but I don't mind getting to the Guardians. I think the ownership is warranted.
Yeah, I wonder if it's just a weather thing. Like people think, oh, everybody knows about Coors Field, but nobody knows about, the winds blowing out in Wrigley. So I'm going to outsmart the field and I'm going to play San Diego in Wrigley Field. I don't know why the Padres would be so high owned relative to the Guardians. But yeah, I'm totally on the same page as you. We currently have the Padres projected to be way over owned at 19.8% projected ownership with an 11.2% chance of being the top stack on the board. I'm much more likely to fade the Padres here than Cleveland. Yeah, they're coming in slightly over owned according to the top stack. So as you said, 14.5% with a 13.6% chance of being a top stack on the board. But I think that makes sense to be close to the field there. I mean, that's nearly a neutral play, and in this matchup with Antonio Senzatella, that makes sense to me. I'll probably be a little bit under the field just because that is fairly high ownership for any team on a slate with 30 teams on it, with 60 teams on it, on a slate this size. It's pretty high ownership, but yeah, it's still just such a great spot. It's one of the safer spots on the board. So I think that there will be some Cleveland batters. Obviously, Jose Ramirez, I think, is going to make it into a lot of my lineups today. I haven't looked at his particular ownership yet, though, so maybe that should drive me away. If he's getting to 40% ownership on a 15-game slate, I'll have a little bit less interest there. But yeah, I think going to Cleveland makes a lot more sense to me than going to the Padres for sure.
Yeah, and by the way, just to address Colin Richardson's point in chat, it's because the wind is blowing out over 20 miles per hour in Wrigley. First of all, last I looked, it's not that high, but that aside, it's very favorable hitting conditions. I would still consider Antonio Senzatella at Coors Field to be a more favorable spot, though. And this isn't to say the Padres aren't in a good spot. They are clearly in a good spot. I understand why they're so popular. I don't understand why they're nearly twice as popular as the Cleveland Guardians against Antonio Senzatella. Because I'm going to read off Senzatella's numbers this year. They're not good. In fact, they're the opposite of not good. They're terrible. There's a handful of pitchers that are in discussion for the worst pitcher in baseball this year, and Senzatella is on that list. 4.83 ERA, but a 6.86 expected ERA. And here's his strikeout numbers this year. 10.6%. He cannot get a swing and miss to save his life. And if you're going to have a 10.6% strikeout rate at Coors Field, you're just not going to have success. You can't put the ball in play that often at Coors and find sustained success. I know that his ERA is not crazy terrible at home this year, but it's not something I expect to continue. He's only pitched 26 innings at home. The runs are going to come when he's pitching at Coors Field. So I get behind the Guardians. If I had to roster one of the chalk offenses, I do slightly prefer the Cleveland Guardians to the San Diego Padres. I understand why people are getting to San Diego. It's just their ownership is at the breaking point for me. I don't want to play them at nearly 20% ownership on a slate that has, every single team in baseball in play. If you guys are rostering them, I understand. This is where I'd go to somebody like a Tony Gonzalez. If you're going to make a Padres stack, like if you're convinced, like I need to play the Padres today, you really want to play the chalk at offense, differentiate a pitcher a little bit. That's where somebody like a Tony Gonzalez comes into play. But getting back to the other side of these games, it's a Coors Field game, so it's clearly favorable hitting conditions for Cleveland. And then also in the Cubs game, they have a tough matchup against Sean Manaea, but the wind's blowing out. It's also favorable for them. How do you like the other side of these games? The Cubs going up against Manaea, the Rockies going up against Shane Bieber. Do you like to get to either of these teams in the same favorable hitting conditions that are creating chalk on the opposite side?
Yeah, I mean, the Rockies look pretty good in the top stacks tool, coming in at 1.5% projected ownership with a 2.7% chance of being the top stack on the board. So I can see merit to going to the Rockies for sure. I'm if I can get a crunch in before 6:05, I'm going to kind of jam in the Braves, like allow myself to get to like 20% of the Braves, just because I think that's such a good spot for the Braves that I'm going to go there, which will lead me away from some of these other stacks. But if you don't want to do that, I actually think, I think playing the Rockies makes some sense against Shane Bieber. Who knows how he's going to do in Colorado? It's obviously not his usual conditions. So if they can get to Shane Bieber, then they have a bullpen game, and you don't even have to worry about going up against a pretty solid major league pitcher. So I think going to Colorado makes some sense. The Cubs, I have less interest in just because the field is getting there a good amount. We're projected for 6.8% ownership with a 4.3% chance of being the top stack on the board. I would have interest if they were getting 2% ownership and we had some positive leverage there, but at that level of ownership, even in solid hitting conditions with the wind in Wrigley, it's a tough matchup with Sean Manaea. So I don't have a ton of interest in the Cubs at 6.8% ownership, but I think if you want to go there a little bit, I think it can make some sense just to take advantage of the weather. It's still not like they're getting 20% ownership. So I think it's fine to go to the Cubs, but I don't love them. I don't love Colorado either, but I think there's a little bit more merit based on the leverage. How much interest do you have in the Cubs or the Rockies?
So I would prefer to get to the Rockies just because the field isn't getting there. The spot against Sean Manaea, I'm not looking to roster Manaea today, but by the same merit, the Cubs are popular. Like, the Cubs are one of the more negatively leveraged teams we have on the slate. People are rostering them. The only teams more popular than the Cubs today are Cleveland, San Diego, Toronto, and that's it. So they're still one of the most popular teams on the slate. They're far less popular than the San Diego Padres, a third of the ownership, but still a little bit too popular for my liking. The Rockies, on the other hand, again, Shane Bieber, sub 2% ownership on the Rockies. That's something I could get behind because it's Coors Field. It's really favorable hitting conditions. The matchup against Shane Bieber is definitely not the best matchup on the slate. It's one of the more difficult ones. The Rockies, much better offense against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching, so that's problematic. But it's Coors Field. Anything could happen. And if I have an opportunity to play a team at Coors Field at sub 2% ownership, it's something I'm interested in.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. I think I'm prioritizing the Braves at this point just because the field does not, but I do think that makes sense to go there as well.
By the way, I thought the name change. I thought we'd get these sex bots off our trailer. I thought they'd be like, oh no, they get confused. They'd be like, oh, what is this? These aren't the men I spam. But no. Not only have they come back, we've gotten 3 different messages from the sex bots in the last 10 minutes. So we're just
too sexy, I think. They can't help it. I'm wearing the V-neck. Whenever I wear the V-neck, the sex bots come in. I think that really does it. You've obviously got the great fro going on. Not as sexy as it was like in high school for you, but still looking good. So I get it. I get why they want to come spam us.
I haven't shaved in a couple of days. It's probably what's doing it for us.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I apologize. What can I do? What can I do? All right, let's try to look for some other offenses. And most of the offenses we've talked about are pretty pricey, although the Padres are kind of inexpensive, but one that both you and I think are overowned. I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to misspeak. If you're looking at the rest of the board, if you're trying to save money with a stack at offense to pay up for Garrett Cole and Dylan Cease and maybe get really expensive at pitching, is there any value stack that stands out to you for tonight?
Yeah. So, man, Pittsburgh just looks phenomenal in the top stacks tool in terms of their value odds, coming in at 1.8% ownership with a 14.4% chance of being the top point per dollar stack on the slate. That makes a lot of sense to me. It is a tough matchup, and I think that is just because they're so cheap. So I have some interest there. I have interest in getting above the field on Pittsburgh. I don't know that I really want to go overboard there. San Francisco, I have some interest in. They have I don't know that they're really a value stack, though. I'd have to look at their actual dollars, but they have good top point per dollar stack odds. At least they're coming in at 4% ownership with a 5.6% chance of being the top point per dollar stack on the board. So I have some interest in San Francisco. Baltimore looks really good in the tools. Yusei Kikuchi is not the most consistent pitcher. They're in Toronto. So yeah, I have some interest in Baltimore if they're coming in at 1% ownership with a 7.1% chance of being the top value stack on the board. Yeah, I'd say those are kind of the ones that are the most interesting to me. Do you have any other stacks that you wanted to highlight that are interesting to you from a value perspective?
Yeah, I could get behind the Baltimore Orioles. So just like what you said about Kikuchi, I think Kikuchi has potential to be a really good pitcher, but it just hasn't quite panned out. There's inconsistency there. He has a 4.44 ERA, a 5.51 expected ERA. He allows a lot of home runs, 14.6% home run to fly ball rate this year, 20.6% last year. The Baltimore Orioles offense has looked much better as of late than they did at the start of the year. And I mean, we've seen some real significant upside from him. Eric, I'm not sure if Eric's still in the chat, but I'm sure he'll show up after I say this. Eric recently won a GPP stack in the Baltimore Orioles. So not that that's the reason to play them today, but it's just kind of to exemplify that.
Shit, my money also won. I'm fairly certain his 100K was also with Baltimore stack.
I think you're right, actually. I forgot about that, but that was because, I mean, who could remember what happened 3 weeks ago? But yeah, that is true. He also, Adam won 6 figures by stacking the Baltimore Orioles. But the point here is there's real significant upside in the Baltimore Orioles offense. They're not going to hit that ceiling very frequently, but when they do, it's significant. They're going up against a pitcher who's prone to blowing up. So some of the recent starts we've seen from Kikuchi, last time out, he pitched 2/3 of an inning and gave up 3 runs. Wasn't even able to finish the first inning. Before that, he pitched against the Minnesota Twins, 4 2/3 innings, gives up 3 homers. So that was a problematic start for him. There's been some of these blow-up starts for Kikuchi, and I think that's definitely a reason that we could consider the Baltimore Orioles, because Kikuchi could have one of these games where he gives up 2-3 homers and the Orioles are making good contact. So it makes sense, especially from a value standpoint. We have them with 7.5% chance to be the top value stack on the slate. They're also picking up very low ownership. You could very, very comfortably stack the Baltimore Orioles and then pay up for whatever pitchers you want. Baltimore Orioles, Garrett Cole, Dylan Cease. And then also, you don't have to worry too much about pitcher ownership when you're stacking a team like the Orioles, because them individually are going to be so contrarian. They're projected for 1% ownership. And are they the most positive leveraged team today?
The Orioles?
Yeah. Let me refresh. By the way, the top stack tool is free to use today.
They're number 2 behind Pittsburgh. I haven't refreshed though.
Oh, either way, they're still one of the most positively leveraged teams, and that in itself kind of makes me want to get to them to some extent. Then also they're really cheap. They fit in with the pitchers I like. So I like the Baltimore Orioles, and I already have them in my player pool, but
they are the highest leverage stack after a refresh on the board. So yeah, a lot of reason to like Baltimore. Glad we are on the same page. Do you have any interest in Pittsburgh?
No, Pittsburgh sucks. I can't do it.
Fair enough. they're number 2 on the board in terms of leverage, but yeah, that was kind of like, yeah, I get it. I want to play some if the field is going to be not playing them at all. They're so cheap. They allow you to play whoever you want. But yeah, you're right. They just have not shown much upside, and they're playing Miles Mikolas, so it's a tough matchup. Yeah. Tougher to get to.
Yeah, that's a team that I do not like to get to in the Pittsburgh Pirates. There's very few slates I roster them. If it's a smaller slate and they're going up against a really chalky pitcher where I think we're getting some leverage, sure. But Mikolas has pitched fairly well this year, and I just don't know what the realistic upside is in the Pittsburgh Pirates. 15-game slate, it's hard for me to get there. Mikolas here, 2.93 ERA, 3.31 expected ERA. He doesn't generate very many strikeouts, so Mikolas individually doesn't have massive upside. But I don't think he's had any blow-up starts at all this year. Let's see. What was Mikolas's worst start of the year to this point? The most runs, he had one start where he gave up 6 runs. That was against the Milwaukee Brewers, who also have one of the highest ISOs in the league against right-handed pitching and are a good offense. Beyond that, though, he's only had 3 starts the entire season where he's given up more than 2 runs. It's hard for me to back stacking Mikolas, and it's hard for me to get behind stacking the Pittsburgh Pirates. So not particularly them for me, but we've only got about a minute left here, Neil. So is there anything we've not yet talked about that you want to point out before we wrap up our first ever stochastic show together?
No, it's been a very fun show talking some baseball on the stochastic channel. Haven't gotten used to saying that yet. Stochastic channel. Damn it. Yeah, I think that we have basically covered all of my favorite stacks. We were more comprehensive with the pitchers, so let me just double check if there's any other stacks that really jump out at me. Yeah, we talked about the Giants. We talked about Houston. What about the Phillies? Do you have any interest in the Phillies today? I saw people in chat talking about them. They do look pretty good in the tools. 1.2% projected ownership, 2.4% chance to be in the top stack on the board against Trevor Rogers. It's in Philadelphia, so pretty good ballpark there relative to Miami at least. How much interest, if any, do you think you have in the Phillies here?
Yeah, I don't know what happened to Trevor Rogers in the offseason because he was awesome last year. He was the runner-up to Rookie of the Year behind Jonathan India. He had a 2.64 ERA, a 3.37 expected ERA. He looked like one of the most promising young pitchers in baseball. he's just not that guy this year. 5.58 ERA, 4.84 expected ERA. The strikeout rate has plummeted from 28.5% to 19.6. I would think maybe there's an underlying injury, but his fastball velocity is the exact same this year as last year, 94.6. So I don't know what's wrong with Trevor Rogers, but something's wrong. He's not the same guy from last year. So I do have the Phillies in my player pool, not as my highest owned stack or anything like that, but it's one of those teams on a 15-game slate that I think is worth having, 3-4% of.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it was a team worth mentioning just because chat brought it up, and it's a decent spot. If Trevor Rogers is going to stay where he's been this year so far, I think it's worth getting there some. But yeah, I think we've done a pretty good job of covering. How about the Yankees? We talked about, not wanting to play Corey Kluber against the Yankees. The Yankees are obviously always kind of a dangerous stack, coming in at 1.3% ownership. I think it makes some sense to go to the Yankees against Corey Kluber, even if he is a relatively solid pitcher. They're the Yankees. You think he'll be getting there at all?
Let's see. Where do I have the Yankees in my builds? So I have a very limited amount of Yankees. And here's the issue I have with them. It's just the price point also the matchup against Kluber isn't ideal, but the Yankees are also really expensive and there aren't that many cheap stacks I love today. So I found it a little bit difficult to get to the Yankees. I only have a couple of shares of them across a 15-game slate. Like, this is not an important part of my build. If somebody's building 1, 5, 10 lineups, the Yankees would not be one of the teams I get to in that.
Okay. Yeah. I think we've covered all the teams now. I've looked through everything that I wanted to talk about. I think we're good.
All right. So that is going to do it for us today. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and good luck tonight.